The
Look,
alarm
I
clock
need those
shattered
HVAC
Isabella
techs here
Rossi's dream at
immediately with the
exactly
replacement unit. We
4:45 in the
can't
morning.
operate like this.
Yes,
In the
thank you.
dream,
They're here now.
she had been standing in the Louvre, surrounded by masterpieces she had only seen in textbooks. Her own painting hung on those sacred walls, bathed in perfect light. Then the alarm screamed, and the dream collapsed like ash. Reality arrived with the sting of fluorescent light in her studio apartment. The bills were still scattered across her kitchen table where she had left them the night before. Medical invoices from Riverside Nursing Facility. 3 months overdue. The number at the bottom made her stomach clench. $47,000. The number never got smaller. It only grew, multiplying like something alive and hungry. Bella sat up on the edge of her mattress. The springs creaked. She was 24 years old, and she felt ancient. Across the room, an empty canvas stood on a wooden easel. It had been empty for 6 months. The paint tubes on the shelf beside it had dried into hard, useless shells. She used to be an art student. She used to believe in beautiful things. That was before her mother's stroke, before the hospital bills arrived like an avalanche, before she dropped out of the Art Institute halfway through sophomore year and took the first job she could find. The Louvre would have to wait. Paris would have to wait. Everything would have to wait. She made instant coffee in the microwave. The mug was chipped. The coffee tasted like burnt cardboard, but it was hot and it was caffeine, and that was enough. She counted the cash in her tip jar while the coffee cooled. $47.23. She needed $200 by Friday to make the minimum payment on her mother's account. The nursing facility director had been patient, but patience had limits. Her uniform hung on the back of the bathroom door, faded polyester. Morning Glory Diner stitched across the breast pocket in thread that was coming loose. This was her 3rd year wearing the same 2 uniforms. She rotated them, washing one while wearing the other. The fabric had worn thin at the elbows. Her sneakers had duct tape holding the left sole together. She looked at herself in the mirror as she tied her hair back. Dark circles under her eyes. Skin pale from too many double shifts and not enough sleep. She manufactured a smile. It looked cracked and false, but it would have to do. Customers expected smiles. Smiles meant tips. Tips meant her mother could stay in the facility 1 more month. On the way out, she paused by the photo on her bedside table. Her mother before the stroke, standing in their old garden, surrounded by pink roses that smelled like honey. Her mother was smiling, really smiling, not the manufactured kind. "Morning, Mama," Bella whispered. "I'll visit on Sunday, I promise." The photo didn't answer. It never did. The walk to the diner took 20 minutes through pre-dawn Chicago streets. November cold bit through her thin jacket. She pulled it tighter and kept walking. The city was just beginning to wake. Delivery trucks rumbled past. A homeless man slept in a doorway covered in cardboard. She had $3 in her pocket. She left 2 of them tucked under the cardboard. He would need coffee when he woke up. The Morning Glory Diner sat on the corner of Madison and 5th, a relic from another era. The building was pure 1950s architecture, all chrome and glass and neon. The sign out front flickered. Half the letters were burned out. It read M.O. Ning G.L.R.Y. The owner kept promising to fix it. 3 years later, it still flickered. Bella had her own key. She unlocked the front door at 5:30, exactly on time. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. That bell was the soundtrack to her life. She heard it in her dreams sometimes, a tired metallic sound that announced another customer, another order, another dollar that might end up in the tip jar if she smiled wide enough. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and decades of fried bacon grease. The scent had soaked into the walls. It would never come out. The floor was scuffed linoleum, sticky in places where the mop never quite reached. The booths were red vinyl, faded to the color of dried roses. Booth 4 in the back corner had a rip in the seat that someone had tried to fix with duct tape. Bella flipped on the lights. Fluorescent tubes buzzed and flickered before catching. She started the first pot of coffee. The machine was older than she was. It wheezed and gurgled like it had emphysema. But it made coffee, and that was what mattered. Sal Romano arrived at 5:45. He was the owner, a 52-year-old immigrant from Naples who had bought this place 30 years ago when it was already falling apart. He still had the accent. He still had the dream of someday returning to Italy. But the diner held him here, day after day, year after year. "Morning, Bella," he said, tying on his apron. His voice was rough from too many cigarettes. "You look tired." "I'm fine." "You say that every day." He didn't push. Sal was good that way. He fired up the grill. The smell of heating metal and old grease filled the air. "We got the breakfast rush coming. You ready?" "Always am." Brenda Thompson came in at 6. She was 41, a veteran waitress with 2 teenage kids at home, and the permanent expression of someone who had stopped expecting good things. She had worked at the Morning Glory for 12 years. She had seen waitresses come and go. Most didn't last 6 months. Bella had lasted 3 years, and Brenda still hadn't warmed to her. "You take the front," Brenda said without greeting. "I got the window booths." "Sure, Brenda. And don't forget to refill the ketchup bottles. They're half empty." "I did it yesterday." "We'll do it again." Bella did it again. The regulars started arriving at 6:30. Frank came first. A construction foreman with hands like cinder blocks and a face weathered by decades of outdoor work. He sat at the counter, ordered black coffee and the number 3, and opened the sports page. He would leave exactly $1 as a tip. He always did. It didn't matter if his bill was $6 or $16, $1 like clockwork. The 2 secretaries arrived at 7, Martha and June, both in their 50s, both working at the law office down the street. They ordered wilted Caesar salads and spent an hour dissecting their boss's love life in whispers that carried across the diner. They left decent tips, 10%, sometimes 12% if they were feeling generous. Old Man Johnson shuffled in at 7:10 and demanded his usual booth by the bathroom. He was 80-something, deaf in one ear, and insisted on hot sauce with everything. Even his oatmeal. Bella had stopped questioning it. This was her world. These people. This diner. This routine that repeated itself 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It wasn't the Louvre, it wasn't Paris, but it paid the bills. Barely. At exactly 7:15, the door opened again. The bell chimed, and everything that came after began with that sound. The old man who entered was tall once, but stooped now by age and gravity. He wore a faded tweed coat that looked like it had survived several decades and would outlast several more. The elbows were worn smooth. The buttons were mismatched. Underneath, he wore trousers with careful creases and shoes that were scuffed but polished. Everything about him spoke of dignity maintained against long odds. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line carved deep by time and weather, and losses no one could see. His eyes were pale blue and watery, but something sharp lived behind them, something that noticed things. He walked slowly, leaning on a wooden cane that had been rubbed smooth by years of use. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. He didn't speak. He simply walked to booth 4, the one in the back corner by the window, and sat down. Sal looked up from his grill. "That's the old guy. Comes in same time every day. Don't bother trying to talk to him. Just give him black coffee and the daily special. He'll pay exact change and leave." Brenda was pouring coffee for Martha and June. She glanced over her shoulder at the old man and snorted. "Waste of a 4-top booth. We should stick him at the counter." But Bella saw something different. She had grown up with a grandfather who was like this man. Silent, proud, an immigrant who had come to America with nothing and built a life with his hands. Her grandfather had died when she was 16, and she still missed him. The way he sat without speaking, the way he expected nothing from anyone, the dignity that asked for no acknowledgement. This old man in booth 4 reminded her of that. She grabbed a coffee pot and a menu and walked over. The old man was staring out the window at the street. Morning light slanted through the glass. Dust motes floated in the beam. "Good morning, sir," Bella said. Her voice was gentle. "My name is Bella. Can I start you with some coffee?" The old man didn't look at her. He made a sound that might have been a grunt. It wasn't quite agreement. It wasn't quite dismissal, it was just sound. Bella poured the coffee anyway. Black. No cream, no sugar. She set the menu in front of him. "Daily special today is eggs and sausage, toast and hash browns on the side. I'll give you a minute to decide." No response. She walked away. When she came back 5 minutes later with her notepad, the menu was still closed. The coffee was untouched. The old man was still staring out the window. "Are you ready to order, sir?" Another grunt. Bella made a decision. "I'll bring you the special. If you don't like it, we'll figure something else out." She brought him the plate 10 minutes later. Eggs over easy. sausage links, toast cut into triangles, hash browns with a sprinkle of paprika. She set it down carefully. The old man's hands were resting on the table. She noticed then that his knuckles were swollen. Arthritis. The joints were inflamed and twisted. His fingers trembled slightly. He picked up his fork. It shook in his grip. He tried to cut the toast. The diner's knives were dull. They had been dull for years. The toast tore instead of cutting clean. Frustration flickered across his face. Bella didn't hesitate. Allow me, sir. She took the knife from his hand, gently, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She cut his toast into 4 perfect squares, easy to pick up, easy to manage with hands that didn't work the way they used to. For the first time, the old man looked at her. His pale blue eyes met hers. They were watery with age, but there was something else in them now. Surprise, maybe gratitude, maybe recognition of a kindness he hadn't expected. He gave a single sharp nod. Then he looked back down at his plate and began to eat. Bella walked away. She didn't think much of it. It was just a small thing. Cutting toast. Anyone would have done it. She went back to refilling coffee cups and taking orders and manufacturing smiles for tips. The old man finished his breakfast in silence. He paid with exact change from a worn leather wallet. $6.37, no tip. He left without a word. Told you, Sal said from the grill. Old coot don't talk. That's fine, Bella said. Not everyone needs to. The next morning at 7:15, the old man came back. Same coat, same slow walk, same booth. Booth 4 by the window. Bella brought him coffee without asking. Black. She brought him the daily special. Scrambled eggs this time. Bacon instead of sausage. Same toast. And without being asked, she cut it into 4 perfect squares before setting the plate down. The old man looked up at her. Another brief nod. The barest acknowledgement. But it was something. This became their ritual. Every morning. 7:15 exactly. The old man in booth 4, Bella bringing him coffee and the daily special. Always cutting his toast into quarters because his hands trembled and the world was hard enough without struggling with breakfast. She began talking to him during those brief moments. Just small talk, filling the silence with the sound of another human voice. Cold morning today? This coffee should warm you right up. No response. We've got apple pie for dessert if you're interested. Sal's wife made it yesterday. It's actually pretty good. Silence. I'm saving up to visit Paris someday. The Louvre. Have you ever been? Nothing. But she felt like he was listening. The way he paused mid-bite sometimes. The way his posture shifted slightly toward her voice. He never responded with words. But his silence felt different from the silence of someone who wasn't paying attention. After the first month, he started leaving quarters on the table. Just a few. 50 cents. 75 cents. Not much, but intentional. A silent acknowledgement that meant more to Bella than the $5 bills that other customers sometimes left. Brenda noticed. Still talking to your boyfriend, Bella? He's not my boyfriend. Well, you're wasting your breath. He's probably deaf. Sal called from the kitchen. Leave her alone, Brenda. If she wants to talk to a brick wall, let her. At least he don't complain about the eggs being too runny. The other waitresses thought she was crazy. Why spend time on a customer who barely tipped and never spoke? But Bella didn't care. Those 10 minutes every morning became something she looked forward to, an anchor in days that otherwise blurred together into an exhausting sameness. In a world that demanded everything from her and gave back so little, this small connection felt pure. It wasn't about the tip. It wasn't about anything except one human being seeing another human being and offering a moment of warmth. She had no idea that every gesture was being cataloged. Every word was being heard. Every kindness was being weighed and measured by a mind far sharper than anyone in the Morning Glory diner could possibly imagine. The weeks became months. Bella's life outside the diner remained a struggle. Her mother's condition was stable, but not improving. The bills kept coming. She picked up extra shifts at an art supply store on weekends, standing behind a counter selling brushes and canvas to people who could still afford to dream. She came home exhausted, fell into bed, and woke up 4 hours later to do it again. The canvas in her apartment stayed empty, but every morning the old man in booth 4 was there, a constant, reliable as sunrise, and every morning Bella brought him coffee and cut his toast and talked to him about small things that probably didn't matter to anyone but her. She told him about her mother, about the stroke that had come without warning, about the garden with the pink roses, about how her mother used to hum while she cooked dinner, and now she couldn't remember Bella's name half the time. She told him about art school, about the scholarship she had won, about the professors who said she had talent, about the moment she walked out those doors for the last time knowing she would never walk back in. She told him about Paris, about standing in the Louvre someday and seeing Monet's water lilies in person, about how she had read that the light in those paintings changed depending on where you stood, like the water was really moving. The old man never responded with words. But sometimes, when she mentioned her mother, his hand would tremble a little more. And once, when she talked about Paris, she caught the smallest flicker of something in his eyes. Not quite a smile, but not quite nothing either. She didn't know his name. She called him Sir, or sometimes the gentleman in booth 4, when talking to other staff. She didn't know where he lived or whether he had family or what his life looked like outside this diner. He was a mystery, but he was her mystery. 10 minutes of quiet communion in a world that was otherwise noise and chaos and bills she couldn't pay. One morning in late October, she noticed something new. The old man was staring at a photograph on the menu. It was an old picture, printed on the laminated page. The diner's original owner had put it there years ago. A black and white photo of a woman standing in front of a small cafe. The sign above her head read, Eleanor's Corner Cafe. The woman was smiling. She looked kind. The old man stared at that photo for a long time, long enough that his coffee grew cold. His eggs grew cold. When Bella came to refill his cup, she saw something in his face that hadn't been there before. Grief, old and deep, the kind that never really heals, just gets buried under years. That was the original owner's wife, Bella said softly. Eleanor. The diner used to be called Eleanor's, I think, before Mr. Romano bought it. The old man didn't respond, but his finger traced the edge of the photograph gently, like touching something precious and fragile. Bella refilled his coffee and left him alone with his memories. 18 months passed this way. Routine, ritual, small kindnesses exchanged in silence. The old man became as much a part of Bella's life as the bell above the door, or the smell of burnt coffee, or the worn vinyl in the booths. She never expected anything more. She never imagined that this silent old man was testing her, watching her, judging not her skills or her appearance or her potential for profit, but something deeper, something that couldn't be bought or faked or taught in any school. Character, the kind that shows itself when no one important is watching. And then came the Tuesday that changed everything. The day started wrong. Bella's phone rang at 2 a.m. It was the night nurse from her mother's facility. There was a problem with her mother's medication. A new prescription that insurance wouldn't cover. A bill that was due immediately. Could Bella authorize the payment? How much? Bella asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. $800. She didn't have $800. She had $47 in her tip jar and maybe $20 in her checking account. She told the nurse she would figure it out. She hung up and stared at the ceiling until her alarm went off at 4:45. She called in sick to her weekend job at the art supply store. She needed the hours at the diner today, needed the tips. Maybe if she worked lunch and dinner, doubled up her shifts, she could scrape together enough to make a payment. She walked to work in a daze. Her mind was doing math, ugly math that never came out in her favor. She arrived at the Morning Glory at 5:30, made the coffee, flipped on the lights, went through the motions with a smile that felt more brittle than usual. 7:15 came and went. Booth 4 stayed empty. 7:20, 7:25, 7:30. The old man didn't come. Bella felt a twist of concern in her chest. He was never late, not once in 18 months. She glanced at the door every time the bell chimed, but it was never him, just the regulars. Frank with his newspaper, Martha and June with their gossip, Old Man Johnson with his hot sauce. By 7:45, she was genuinely worried. He was old. What if something had happened? What if he was sick? What if he had fallen? She asked Sal if he knew where the old man lived. Sal just shrugged. No idea. He never said, never filled out a comment card, never used a credit card I could trace. Just cash, always cash. Bella went back to work, but the concern stayed with her. She poured coffee and took orders and refilled ketchup bottles. But part of her mind kept glancing at booth 4, expecting to see him there. At 8:05, the bell above the door chimed. But it wasn't the old man. The entire diner fell silent. Even the sizzle of Sal's grill seemed to hush. 4 men in black suits stepped through the door. They moved with military precision, earpieces, sunglasses despite the overcast morning. Two of them immediately flanked the entrance, hands clasped in front of them, eyes scanning the room with unnerving calm. The other two stepped aside to clear the doorway. A fifth man entered behind them. He was older, perhaps late 60s, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him perfectly. Every line, every seam was tailored to precision. The suit probably cost more than Bella earned in a year. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had never seen the inside of a discount store. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. He looked around the Morning Glory diner with an expression that suggested he had just stepped into a subway station bathroom, distaste mixed with purpose. Sal stepped out from behind the grill, wiping his greasy hands on his apron. His usual bluster was completely gone. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The man in the charcoal suit didn't acknowledge Sal's existence. His eyes swept the room, methodical and thorough, until they landed on Bella. She was standing frozen by the coffee machine, pot still in hand. The man walked directly toward her. His expensive shoes made soft, precise sounds on the linoleum. The two bodyguards followed a few paces behind. Their presence sucked the air out of the room. Conversations died. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Even Frank lowered his newspaper. The man stopped directly in front of Bella. He was a head taller than her. His eyes were gray and sharp, the eyes of someone who had spent decades reading contracts and finding loopholes and winning arguments in courtrooms. He gave her a long, appraising look. "Are you Miss Isabella Rossi?" His voice was calm and deep and carried the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud. It was the voice of someone who expected answers and always got them. Bella's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth was dry. She managed to nod. What was this? Was she in trouble? Had she witnessed something she didn't remember? Was this about her mother's bills? Had they sent lawyers after her? The coffee pot felt impossibly heavy in her hand. "My name is Marcus Davies," the man said. "I am a senior partner at the law firm of Sterling, Cromwell, and Davies. I was the personal attorney for Mr. Arthur Pendleton." The name hung in the air like smoke. Arthur Pendleton. It sounded formal, important, expensive. It took Bella a moment to connect it to anything she knew. She didn't know anyone named Arthur Pendleton. Then the man added, "The gentleman who sat in booth 4 every morning." Understanding hit her like cold water. The old man. His name was Arthur Pendleton. All this time she had called him Sir. She had never known his name. "Arthur," she whispered. The word felt strange in her mouth. "Is he okay? He didn't come in this morning." Something shifted in Marcus Davies' expression. Not quite softening, but close. The professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing something that might have been sympathy. "Mr. Pendleton passed away peacefully in his sleep late last night." The coffee pot slipped from Bella's hand. It didn't fall. She caught it just in time, but her hands were shaking now. A wave of grief washed over her, sudden and unexpected, and completely out of proportion to what made sense. She barely knew him. He never said a word to her. But their ritual had become part of her life, a small, steady point in a turbulent world. And now it was gone. Tears pricked at the back of her eyes. She blinked them away, but one escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek. "Oh," she said. Her voice came out small and broken. "I'm so sorry to hear that." Behind her, Brenda was staring from across the diner. Her mouth was open. Frank had set his newspaper down entirely. Martha and June had stopped their gossip mid-sentence. The entire diner had become an audience to a drama they didn't understand. Marcus Davies gave a slight nod, a required acknowledgement. Then his voice returned to its professional tone. "Mr. Pendleton's final will and testament contains a provision that requires your immediate presence. If you would be so kind as to gather your things, a car is waiting outside to take us to my office for the reading." Bella stared at him. The words made no sense. Will, testament, her presence required. None of it connected to anything in her reality. "I think you have the wrong person," she said. "I just served him coffee." "There is no mistake, Ms. Rossi." Marcus Davies' voice was firm, but not unkind. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a document. "Your name is Isabella Rossi. You are a waitress at this establishment, and for the past year and a half you have cut his toast into 4 equal squares every morning." He paused. The next words came slower, weighted with significance. "Without fail, without ever being asked." The detail was so specific, so mundane, so impossible to have been noticed by anyone. But Arthur had noticed, he had seen, he had remembered, and he had told his lawyer about it. Written it down somewhere in legal documents that probably cost $1,000 a page. Bella couldn't process it. The room tilted slightly. She looked at Sal, desperate for something to anchor her. "Sal, I don't know what this is." Sal's face was pale. He looked as confused as she felt, but he found his voice. "Go, just go. Brenda can cover your tables." Brenda shot Bella a look of pure venomous envy, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. Not with 4 bodyguards standing in the middle of the Morning Glory diner like they had stepped out of a movie. Bella's hands were shaking as she untied her apron. She set it on the counter, moving on autopilot. She grabbed her worn satchel from the back room. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. When she walked back into the dining area, the bodyguards formed a protective circle around her. They created a bubble of wealth and power in this humble diner, a bubble that she was suddenly inside. It felt wrong. It felt like a mistake. As they escorted her toward the door, she looked back once. The diner looked small and sad under the fluorescent lights. Sal was standing by the grill, spatula in hand, looking lost. Brenda was watching with her arms crossed, and an expression that Bella couldn't read. The regulars were all staring. The bell chimed as the door opened. Cold November air hit her face. A sleek black Lincoln Continental was idling at the curb. Its engine purred like a sleeping predator. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door. Bella hesitated. This was insane. This couldn't be real. But the leather seats inside looked real. The gleaming chrome looked real. Marcus Davies was already walking around to the other side. Bella slid into the back seat. The leather was butter soft. It smelled like money, like a world she had only seen in movies. The door closed with a solid, expensive thunk. The city noise outside became muffled. She was enclosed in quiet luxury. As the car pulled away from the curb, Bella looked back through the tinted window. The Morning Glory diner receded into the distance. It looked smaller with every second. The flickering sign, the faded chrome, the world she had known for 3 years. She had one terrifying, electrifying thought. She would never see that diner the same way again. The ritual was over. Something new and infinitely more complicated was beginning. And she had no idea that the kind old man she had mourned for all of 5 minutes had just reached from beyond the grave to pull her into a world she didn't understand. A world where cutting toast into 4 squares had somehow become the key that unlocked a door she didn't even know existed. The car moved through morning traffic in silence. Bella sat in the back seat and tried to understand what was happening. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. Outside the tinted windows, Chicago slid past. Familiar streets that suddenly looked alien. She had walked these blocks 1,000 times. Now she was gliding through them in a car that cost more than everything she owned combined. Marcus Davies sat across from her, reviewing documents from his briefcase. His face was an unreadable mask, professional, detached. Whatever was in those papers, he had read them before. This was routine for him. It was anything but routine for Bella. She wanted to ask questions, 100 of them, but her throat was tight and her mind was blank, and the only thing she could think was that Arthur was dead. The old man in booth 4, gone. And she hadn't even known his real name until 5 minutes ago. The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive. The morning sun glinted off the water. Sailboats bobbed in the harbor. People jogged along the path, normal life continuing, while Bella's life fractured into something unrecognizable. Arthur Pendleton. She rolled the name around in her mind. It sounded important. Official. Not like someone who would sit in a shabby diner for 18 months without speaking. Not like someone who would need help cutting toast. "Where are we going?" she finally managed to ask. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "My offices," Marcus Davies said without looking up from his papers. "Downtown. We'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Then what? Then she would sit in some law office and find out why a silent old man had written her into his will. Probably something small. A token. Maybe a few $100s as a final tip. A kind gesture from someone who appreciated her small kindnesses. That was all it could be. Anything else was impossible. The car glided to a stop in front of a gleaming skyscraper. Glass and steel reached up toward the sky. The lobby visible through the windows was all marble and polished chrome. This was the world of corporate law, of billion-dollar deals and cases that made headlines. This was not Bella's world, but the bodyguards opened her door anyway. And Marcus Davies was already walking toward the entrance, and she had no choice but to follow because the alternative was sitting in a car trying to make sense of something that made no sense. The lobby was as intimidating as she had feared. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished marble floor. She looked exactly like what she was, a waitress in a cheap uniform and duct-tape sneakers. Out of place, out of depth, out of time. An elevator carried them up in silence. Bella watched the numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, 50. They didn't stop until 62. The top floor, the penthouse. The doors opened onto a corridor that smelled like leather and money and quiet power. Art hung on the walls. Real art. Expensive art. Bella recognized a Rothko as they passed. Her artist's eye couldn't help but notice. That painting alone was worth millions. What was she doing here? Marcus Davies led her to a massive boardroom. The door was already open. Bella could see inside. A long table. 2 people already seated. And the moment she saw them, she knew this wasn't going to be a small token or a kind gesture. This was something else entirely. The woman was in her early 50s, dressed in a suit that probably cost what Bella made in 6 months. Every hair in place, every piece of jewelry carefully chosen. She looked at Bella the way someone might look at a stain on expensive carpet. Distaste, confusion, dismissal. The man beside her was younger, maybe late 20s, slicked back hair, a suit that fit too tight across his shoulders like he had bought it hoping to grow into it. His face was twisted in a scowl. He looked at Bella, and his eyes narrowed with immediate contempt. Before Marcus Davies could make introductions, the young man spoke. "This is who we've been waiting for?" His voice was loud, entitled, edged with disbelief. "A waitress? Grandfather's gone senile after all?" The words hung in the air like poison, and Bella understood then that whatever was about to happen in this room, it wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be kind. And it was going to change everything. Marcus Davies cleared his throat. The sound cut through the tension in the boardroom like a knife through silk. He set his briefcase on the polished mahogany table and turned to face the room. His voice was formal, professional, the voice of a man who had delivered news both good and terrible for 40 years, and learned to keep his face neutral through all of it. "Miss Diana Pendleton, Mr. Caleb Pendleton, this is Miss Isabella Rossi." The woman Diana gave Bella a look that could have frozen water. Her eyes traveled from Bella's duct-tape sneakers up to her faded uniform, and finally to her face. The assessment took 3 seconds. The conclusion was written in the slight curl of Diana's lip. Not worth her time. Not worth anyone's time. Caleb didn't bother with subtlety. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms like a petulant child being forced to sit through a school assembly. "So we're really doing this? We're really including the help in Grandfather's will reading?" Marcus Davies gestured to a chair far down the table from where Diana and Caleb sat. The distance was intentional, a chasm between 2 different worlds, old money and no money, pedigree and poverty, power and powerlessness. "Miss Rossi, please have a seat." Bella walked to the chair on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The leather was cold through her thin uniform pants. She set her worn satchel on the floor beside her. It looked pitiful next to Diana's Hermes handbag. Everything about Bella looked pitiful in this room. The worn fabric of her clothes, the calluses on her hands from years of carrying plates, the smell of diner grease that probably clung to her hair no matter how much she washed it. She folded her hands in her lap and tried to make herself smaller, tried to disappear. 4 bodyguards stood against the far wall like statues. Their faces revealed nothing. They had probably seen 100 will readings, 1,000 desperate people hoping for money. This was just another day for them. For Bella, it was the strangest day of her life. Marcus Davies opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick leather-bound document. The will. It looked ancient, important, the kind of thing that carried weight in courtrooms and determined destinies. He placed it on the table with reverence, then removed his reading glasses from his jacket pocket and slid them on. "Now that all parties mentioned in the primary codicil are present, we can begin." His voice shifted into a monotone. the voice of someone reading legal text that had been written and rewritten by expensive lawyers until every word was precise and defensible in court. Most of it flew over Bella's head. Trusts and endowments, bequests to foundations she had never heard of. The Art Institute of Chicago, Northwestern University Medical School, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Sums that made her head spin. 3 million here, 5 million there. Numbers so large they stopped feeling real. The Pendleton fortune was immense. Arthur hadn't just been wealthy. He had been a titan, a man who moved in circles where millions were rounding errors. And he had sat in booth 4 every morning, eating eggs and toast cut into quarters. Bella tried to reconcile the two images. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. Diana and Caleb sat through the charitable bequests with barely concealed impatience. Diana's fingers drummed on the table. An expensive manicure. Perfect nails. The sound was like a metronome counting down to something. Caleb checked his phone twice. Marcus Davies paused both times and stared at him until he put it away. Then Marcus Davies reached a new section of the will. His voice shifted slightly, not quite softer, but more personal, like the words he was about to read meant something beyond legal obligation. To my friend and physician, Dr. Alistair Finch, who stayed by my side through the worst of it and never once suggested I was being foolish, I leave the sum of $1 million. May he finally take that trip to Scotland he's been postponing for 30 years. Gasps rippled through the room. $1 million. To a single person. For friendship. Bella thought about what $1 million could do. Could pay off her mother's medical bills 50 times over. Could buy a lifetime of security. Could make dreams possible again. And Arthur had just given it away as a thank you to his doctor. What kind of wealth allowed someone to do that without blinking? Marcus Davies paused. He looked down the table at Diana and Caleb. Something in his expression suggested he wasn't looking forward to what came next. But he was a professional. He would do his job regardless of how unpleasant it became. To my daughter-in-law, Diana Pendleton, and to my grandson, Caleb Pendleton, I leave the contents of the Pendleton Family Trust as contractually obligated by pre-existing family arrangements. Diana leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, hungry. This was what they had been waiting for. This was why they had flown in from wherever they lived. Why they had put on expensive suits and sat through an hour of charitable donations with forced patience. Marcus Davies continued reading. This amounts to a principal sum of $10 million each, $20 million total, split between mother and son, an amount that would set them up for life, multiple lifetimes. Generational wealth that could be passed down through families like titles and estates. But Caleb's face didn't show gratitude. It showed fury. He exploded out of his chair. The leather squeaked. His fists hit the table hard enough to make the papers jump. 10 million? That's it? His voice was loud enough to make Bella flinch. Diana reached for his arm, but he shook her off. His face had gone red. The kind of red that came from blood pressure spiking and rage overriding common sense. That's an insult! The company is worth billions! Billions with a B! And he's leaving us 10 million each like we're some distant cousins he barely knew? Marcus Davies didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Your grandfather liquidated the majority of his personal assets over the last 2 years, Mr. Pendleton. He converted much of his fortune into the charitable foundations I just outlined. What he chose to do with his personal wealth was and is his own prerogative. The family trust obligations have been met in full. That is the end of it. Diana's mask of polite civility cracked. Her voice was ice over steel. He owed us more than that. We're his family. Caleb gave up years of his life working for Pendleton Global, learning the business, preparing to take over. And this is how he's repaid? $10 million and a pat on the head? With respect, Mrs. Pendleton, your son worked for Pendleton Global for 18 months before being asked to leave due to performance issues, the documentation of which is in the company's HR files, should you wish to review it. Caleb's face went from red to purple. That's a lie. I resigned because grandfather was impossible to work with. Everyone knows that. The record stands as it is, Mr. Pendleton. Silence fell like a hammer. Diana's jaw was clenched so tight Bella could see the muscles working. Caleb was breathing hard through his nose like a bull about to charge. But Marcus Davies just stood there with his reading glasses and his leather-bound will, and 40 years of experience dealing with angry beneficiaries who thought they deserved more. He let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then he turned a page. We will now address the personal bequests. Bella's heart was pounding. She didn't know why she was here, didn't know what Arthur could have possibly left her. A few $100s? A keepsake? Something small to acknowledge the 18 months of coffee and conversation? That would be enough. More than enough. She hadn't expected anything at all. Marcus Davies looked directly at her over his reading glasses. The room went still. Even Caleb stopped fuming long enough to follow the lawyer's gaze. They all turned to look at Bella, the waitress, the nobody in the faded uniform. Marcus Davies began to read. To Miss Isabella Rossi, the young woman at the Morning Glory Diner. Bella's breath caught. Hearing her name in Arthur's will felt surreal, like something happening to someone else, like a story she was watching unfold from a great distance. Who showed an old man kindness when she had no reason to? Who treated him with dignity when others saw only a nuisance, and who without fail cut his toast because she noticed his hands trembled. Tears filled Bella's eyes. She couldn't stop them. They spilled over and ran down her cheeks. He had seen her, really seen her. Every small gesture, every moment of care. He had noticed when she thought no one was paying attention, when she thought kindness was something she gave into a void that gave nothing back. But he had been watching, remembering, valuing something the rest of the world dismissed as worthless. Marcus Davies' voice softened, just slightly, just enough that Bella knew he had liked Arthur, that this wasn't just a job to him. To Ms. Rossi, I leave a legacy of kindness returned. The words hung in the air like bells. First, I bequeath to her the sum of $250,000 to be transferred to her account immediately to ease her burdens as she once eased mine. The room exploded. Not literally. But the air changed. The pressure dropped. Bella felt like she had been pushed underwater. $250,000. The number was so large it didn't compute. She had never held more than $300 at once in her entire life. Her net worth at this moment was $67, and Arthur had just given her $250,000. Diana gasped. Caleb's mouth dropped open. Bella couldn't breathe. $250,000. That was her mother's care, for years. That was every medical bill, every debt, every crushing weight that had been pressing down on her chest for 3 years. Gone. Just gone. Erased with a single sentence in a will. She could breathe again. For the first time since her mother's stroke, she could actually breathe. But Caleb was on his feet again. This time he was shaking. Not with rage, with something worse. With disbelief so profound it had curdled into fury. What? He's giving $250,000 to a hash slinger? He pointed at Bella like she was an exhibit in a trial. Evidence of a crime. She's a waitress. She poured his coffee, and he's giving her $250,000? Diana grabbed his arm this time and held on. Her voice was sharp. Caleb, sit down. We'll contest this. Caleb's voice had gone shrill, desperate. He was clearly not in his right mind. She manipulated him. She saw a vulnerable old man and she targeted him. Marcus Davies set the will down on the table. His hands were perfectly steady. His voice dropped to a temperature that could have frozen nitrogen. Please sit down, Mr. Pendleton. Something in his tone made Caleb pause. It wasn't loud, but it carried authority that had been earned in courtrooms where billions of dollars were decided by the precision of language and the weight of evidence. It was the voice of a man who had buried better lawyers than Caleb could ever afford to hire. I am not finished reading the will. The words were quiet, but absolute. Caleb stared at Marcus Davies. Then slowly, like a child being scolded by a teacher, he sank back into his chair. Diana's hand was still on his arm. Whether she was restraining him or supporting him was impossible to tell. Marcus Davies picked up the will again. He adjusted his reading glasses, found his place on the page, and continued as if Caleb's outburst had been nothing more than a cough during a concert. His voice was measured, deliberate, each word given its full weight. And finally, because it was the last place on earth where I felt seen, not as a source of wealth or a means to an end, but as a human being who simply wanted a cup of coffee and a moment of peace. Bella's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the table to steady them. I leave her the one thing that brought me a small measure of peace in my final years. Marcus Davies paused. The silence was so complete, Bella could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Diana breathing, could hear Caleb's shoe tapping against the floor in agitated rhythm. I bequeath to Miss Isabella Rossi, in its entirety, the property and business known as the Morning Glory Diner, located at 152 Madison and 5th. The words didn't make sense at first. They were English. Bella understood each individual word. But strung together in that order, they became meaningless. A riddle. A puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. The Morning Glory Diner. Arthur was leaving her the diner? But Sal owned the diner. Sal had owned it for 30 years. Sal had bought it when he immigrated from Naples and turned it into something. A life. A livelihood. A piece of the American dream. Unless Marcus Davies finished the sentence, which I purchased 6 months ago through a subsidiary company for the sum of $800,000. The room was silent, perfectly, completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the building seemed to have stopped. No air conditioning hum, no distant elevator dings, no traffic from 62 floors below, just silence and the sound of Bella's world fracturing. Arthur had bought this diner 6 months ago, the place where she worked, the place where she had served him coffee every morning. He had bought it, and now he was giving it to her. She owned the Morning Glory Diner, the place where she had spent 3 years pouring coffee and cutting toast and smiling through exhaustion. The place where her feet hurt and her back ached and her dreams died one shift at a time. That place was hers now. It didn't feel real. None of this felt real. Caleb started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and ugly and edged with hysteria. He leaned back in his chair and laughed like he had just heard the funniest joke of his life. The diner! He leaves her a greasy spoon! He was almost crying with laughter now, tears running down his face. But there was no joy in it, just rage expressing itself through the only channel it could find. Oh, that's rich! After all that build-up, after making us sit here and listen to her sob story, he leaves the waitress her own cage. He slapped the table. Grandfather really did have a twisted sense of humor. She gets to keep slinging hash for the rest of her life, that's perfect. But Marcus Davies wasn't laughing. He was watching Bella with an expression she couldn't decipher. Something that looked like pity mixed with respect, mixed with warning. He removed his reading glasses slowly, folded them, set them on the table beside the will. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every person in the room leaned forward to hear it. There is one more thing, Ms. Rossi. Bella looked up. Her vision was blurred with tears, happy tears, overwhelmed tears. Tears that came from too many emotions hitting at once and no way to process them. $250,000 in a diner. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. More than seemed possible. It was a miracle. Included with the diner is a small investment portfolio that Mr. Pendleton attached to the business. Marcus Davies paused. The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. 4, 5. To ensure its long-term viability and provide for capital improvements and operational security. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus Davies' eyes never left Bella's face. The portfolio is currently valued at approximately $5 million. The world stopped. Not metaphorically, literally. Time froze. Sound cut out. Bella's heart stopped beating. Her lungs stopped working. The universe held its breath and waited to see if she would understand the words that had just been spoken. $5 million. $5 million. Not $250,000, $5 million with the diner. And the $250,000, that was $5,250,000. She was a millionaire. No, she was a multimillionaire. The realization hit her like a freight train. Her vision went dark at the edges. She gripped the table harder. If she let go, she would fall. She was sure of it. The floor would open up and she would fall forever. Across the table, Caleb's laughter died in his throat. The sound cut off so abruptly, it was like someone had flipped a switch. His face went from red to white. The color drained out of him like water from a broken glass. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Diana's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes were wide, shocked. The mask of polite superiority had shattered completely. She looked like someone had slapped her. The room erupted in murmurs. The bodyguards shifted. The first movement Bella had seen from them. Even they were surprised. $5 million. Marcus Davies was still watching Bella, waiting for her reaction, waiting to see if she would faint or scream or break down completely. But Bella couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except sit there and try to understand that the grumpy, silent old man in booth 4 had just changed her life in a way that defied comprehension. Arthur Pendleton, founder of Pendleton Global Holdings, a corporate titan, a billionaire who could have had anything, could have eaten anywhere, could have surrounded himself with luxury and comfort and people who said yes to everything. But instead, he had chosen a shabby diner with worn vinyl booths and burnt coffee, had chosen to sit in the same corner every morning, had chosen to be seen by a broke waitress who cut his toast because his hands shook. And he had just handed that waitress $5 million and told her to build something beautiful. Caleb found his voice. It came out as a strangled whisper. 5 million, then louder, desperate. 5 million? He turned to his mother. His eyes were wild, panicked, the eyes of someone watching their inheritance slip through their fingers. He gave her the same amount he gave us. He gave a waitress the same as his own family. More, actually, Marcus Davies said. His voice was mild, factual. Miss Rossi received $5.25 million when you include the cash bequest. You and your mother each received $10 million from the trust. But those are trust funds with conditions and restrictions. Miss Rossi's bequest is free and clear. No strings attached, no conditions, no board oversight. She can do whatever she wishes with it. The words landed like bombs. Diana made a sound low in her throat. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Something in between. The sound of someone realizing they had just lost a battle they didn't know they were fighting. Caleb stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. It hit the floor with a crash that made Bella jump. His face was twisted with rage, pure, undiluted rage. This isn't over, you hear me? He pointed at Bella with a shaking finger. I will destroy you. I will drag this through every court in the country. You're a gold digger. You manipulated a senile old man. You preyed on him. Mr. Pendleton, I suggest you sit down and calm yourself before you say something actionable. Actionable? I'll show you actionable. I'll sue her. I'll sue this firm. I'll sue everyone in this room. He was not in his right mind. Any judge will see that. Marcus Davies' expression didn't change. Your grandfather was evaluated by 3 independent physicians in his final year, including 2 neurologists and 1 psychiatrist. All confirmed he was of sound mind until his final week. The documentation is extensive and will be provided to any court that requests it. I suggest you speak with your own attorney before making threats you cannot back up. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his mother. Diana was staring at the table. Her perfect composure had crumbled. She looked old suddenly, tired, like someone who had played a game and lost and knew it. Come on, Mother, we're leaving. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. Diana let herself be led. She moved like someone in shock. They headed for the door. The bodyguard stepped aside to let them pass. Just before Caleb reached the exit, he turned back to Bella. His face was a mask of pure hatred. This isn't over, he said again. His voice was quieter now, more dangerous. I will take everything from you. Everything. You'll wish you never met him. Then he was gone. The door closed behind him. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. Bella sat at the table and trembled. She couldn't stop. Her whole body was shaking. Too much, too fast, too overwhelming. $5 million. The diner. Freedom. And a man who hated her with the kind of intensity that promised trouble. Marcus Davies sat down in the chair beside her, not across the table anymore, beside her, like they were on the same team now. Are you all right, Ms. Rossi? I don't know. Her voice came out as a whisper. Is any of this real? It's real. Very real. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, set it in front of her. This contains all the relevant paperwork. Account information for the cash transfer, title to the diner property, portfolio statements, insurance documents, tax information. It's a lot to process. I've arranged for you to meet with a financial advisor tomorrow morning. His name is Gerald Chen. He managed your Mr. Pendleton's personal accounts for 20 years. He'll help you understand what you have and how to manage it. Bella stared at the folder. It was thick, substantial, full of papers that represented a life she didn't know how to live. Why did he do this? I can't speak to his full reasoning, but I knew Arthur Pendleton for 43 years. He was the most deliberate man I've ever met. He didn't do anything without careful thought. If he left you this inheritance, it's because he believed you deserved it and that you would do something meaningful with it. I served him coffee. No. Marcus Davies's voice was firm. You saw him as a human being, in a world where everyone wanted something from him, where everyone knew his name and his wealth and treated him accordingly. You saw an old man who needed help cutting his toast, and you helped him without expecting anything in return. That kind of character is rarer than you think. He stood up. A car will take you home. The bodyguards will remain assigned to you for the next month. Given Mr. Caleb's temperament, it's a sensible precaution. If anyone contacts you, especially the Pendletons or anyone claiming to represent them, you call me immediately. Do you understand? Bella nodded. She understood the words, but understanding and processing were two different things. There's one more thing. Marcus Davies reached into the folder and pulled out a small leather journal, worn, old, the kind that had been carried in pockets and handled so much the leather had gone soft. Mr. Pendleton left this for you. He asked me to give it to you after the reading. Bella took the journal. It was warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight. The leather was smooth under her fingers. On the cover, embossed in fading gold letters, were the initials AP. Arthur Pendleton. What is it? His personal journal from the last 18 months. He wanted you to read it, to understand. Bella clutched the journal to her chest. Tears were falling again. She didn't try to stop them. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Ms. Rossi. Just live well. That's what he wanted. The ride back to her apartment building was surreal. The same black Lincoln Continental, the same leather seats. But everything felt different now. The world outside the tinted windows wasn't just familiar streets anymore. It was a world where she had $5 million, where she owned a diner, where she could pay her mother's medical bills without selling her blood. The bodyguards dropped her off at the curb, told her they would be stationed nearby, gave her a phone number to call if she needed anything. Then they drove away and left her standing on the sidewalk in front of her building, looking up at the peeling paint and the broken intercom and the life she had known until this morning. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her legs were made of lead. Her whole body felt like it belonged to someone else. She unlocked her door and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The bills on the table, the empty canvas on the easel, the chipped coffee mug in the sink. Her tiny life, her small world. But she wasn't the same person who had left this apartment this morning. That person had been broke and tired and drowning. This person was a millionaire. This person owned property. This person had choices. The first thing she did was call her mother's nursing facility. Her hands shook so badly she could barely dial. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Riverside Nursing Facility, this is Margaret. This is Isabella Rossi. I'm calling about my mother, Sophia Rossi. Oh, hello, Miss Rossi. Is everything all right? Everything is fine. I need to speak with the billing department. A pause. I can transfer you. Is there a problem with the account? No problem. I want to pay it off. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, did you say pay it off, the full balance? Yes, the full balance. And I want to prepay for the next 2 years. And I want to upgrade my mother to a private room, the best room you have, with a window. And I want to authorize whatever care she needs, physical therapy, new medications, whatever the doctors recommend. Money isn't an issue anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Ms. Rossi, are you sure? The outstanding balance alone is over $14,000, and prepaying for 2 years with the private room upgrade would be substantial. I'm sure. How much exactly? The woman did some calculations. Bella could hear keys clicking. With the current balance, 24 months of care, the private room differential, and a buffer for medical needs, we're looking at approximately $92,000. $92,000. 2 days ago, that number would have been impossible, laughable. Now it was less than 2% of what she had in the bank, or would have in the bank once the transfer cleared. That's fine. I'll come in tomorrow with a cashier's check. A cashier's check for $92,000. Yes. Miss Rossi, can I ask, did you win the lottery? Bella laughed. It came out half sob, half laugh. Something like that. She hung up, stood in her apartment, and then the enormity of it hit her all at once. The weight of 3 years of crushing debt lifted. the constant anxiety, the sleepless nights, the calculations of which bill to pay and which to let slide, the fear that her mother would be kicked out of the facility, the guilt of not being able to afford better care. All of it gone, erased with a phone call. Bella sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and she cried. Not sad tears, relief tears, the kind that came from burdens being lifted, from realizing she could breathe without the weight on her chest. Her mother would be taken care of, she wouldn't lose her home. She could sleep without nightmares about debt collectors and medical bills. It was over. The worst part of her life was over. When the tears finally stopped, she wiped her face with her sleeve, got up, poured herself a glass of water, and sat down at her kitchen table with Arthur's journal. The leather was soft under her fingers. The pages inside were yellowed, filled with Arthur's handwriting. Shaky, but legible. The handwriting of someone whose hands didn't work quite right anymore, but who refused to let that stop them from writing what mattered. The first page had a dedication. Bella read it through tears that started falling again. For Isabella, when I am gone and you are wondering why, read this. Understand. You gave me something money could never buy. You gave me back my humanity. And I am forever grateful. Arthur Pendleton. She turned the page. The entries began. Each one dated. Each one numbered by day. The first entry was from 18 months ago, the day Arthur first walked into the Morning Glory diner. Day 1. Saw her today. The girl Eleanor told me about in my dreams. I know how that sounds, like an old man losing his mind. But I saw her, and I knew. She has Eleanor's kindness in her eyes, the same way of looking at people like they matter. Will she see past the grumpy old man act? Will she see the test for what it is? We shall see. I have time. Not much. Dr. Finch says 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky, but enough time to know if I'm right. Enough time to know if she's the one who can carry forward what Eleanor and I lost. Bella's hands were shaking. She read on, entry after entry. Arthur's observations, his thoughts, his slowly growing certainty that he had found something rare. Someone who gave without expecting return. Someone who saw people instead of opportunities. The entries chronicled every interaction, every conversation, things Bella had said and forgotten, details she had mentioned in passing. He had remembered all of it, written it down, studied her like she was a subject worthy of deep attention. She read for 2 hours, through all 18 months, through Arthur's illness progressing, through his plans taking shape, through his decision to leave her everything that mattered, not the corporate empire. That was just money. But the diner, the place where kindness lived, that was worth protecting, worth passing on to someone who would understand its value. The final entry was dated 3 days ago. Arthur must have known he was dying. The handwriting was worse than ever, but the words were clear. Day 512. This will likely be my last visit to the diner. I am too weak now to hide it. Isabella noticed today. Asked if I was feeling all right. I nodded. What could I say? Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for reminding me that goodness exists. Thank you for being the daughter Eleanor and I never had. I left an extra $5 under the plate. Not enough. Could never be enough. Tomorrow Marcus files the final will. Everything is in place. Isabella, if you are reading this, know that I am not testing you. I am thanking you. And I am asking you to do what I could not. Build something beautiful from the ashes of my revenge. Carry Eleanor's light forward. You have her heart. That is worth more than any fortune. With deepest respect and gratitude, Arthur. Bella closed the journal, set it on the table, looked around her tiny apartment, the empty canvas, the dried paint, the life deferred. Not anymore. She stood up, walked to the easel, picked up a brush. The bristles were stiff with dried paint. She would need new ones. She could afford new ones now. She could afford anything now. But more than that, she could afford to dream again. Could afford to be the person she had been before the bills and the exhaustion and the crushing weight of impossible choices. Could afford to honor the faith that a lonely old man had placed in her. She set the brush down. There would be time for painting, time for dreams, time for Paris and the Louvre and all the things she had locked away. Right now, she needed to sleep. Tomorrow, she would start learning how to be rich, how to own a business, How to live up to the legacy of two people she had never met, but who had somehow chosen her to carry their dream forward. Tomorrow would be overwhelming. Tomorrow would be terrifying. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Bella fell asleep without the weight of the world crushing her chest. Without fear, without desperation. She fell asleep wealthy and safe and chosen. And in her dreams, an old man with pale blue eyes smiled at her and nodded once. Approval given, legacy passed, the ritual complete. Bella woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment she forgot about the will reading, forgot about the money, forgot about everything except that she had overslept and would be late for her shift. Then she saw Arthur's journal on her nightstand, the leather worn smooth, the initials embossed in fading gold, and everything came flooding back. She wasn't late for her shift. She didn't have shifts anymore. She owned the diner. The thought was so absurd, she almost laughed. Almost. But laughing felt wrong. Arthur was dead. The man who had sat in booth 4 every morning for 18 months. The man who had changed her life with kindness returned. He was gone, and she was wealthy, and the two facts existed together in a way that made grief and gratitude impossible to separate. She spent the morning reading more of Arthur's journal. The entries revealed a man she had never known. Brilliant, strategic, capable of patience that spanned years, but also lonely. Profoundly, achingly lonely. The kind of loneliness that came from losing the one person who made the world make sense, and then spending decades building walls around the wound. Entry after entry mentioned Eleanor, his wife, the woman in the photograph on the diner menu. She had owned a small cafe in Brooklyn in the 1950s. That was where Arthur met her. He was 23, fresh out of business school, determined to build an empire. She was 21 and believed that feeding people good food with dignity mattered more than profit margins. They shouldn't have worked, but they did. For 28 years, they did. Then she died. A car accident in 1987. Arthur wrote about it in an entry dated 10 years ago, the anniversary of her death. His handwriting was especially shaky that day. 35 years and the wound is still fresh. I built Pendleton Global into something that would have impressed her father, made more money than we could have spent in 10 lifetimes. But what good is any of it without her? The empire is ash. Everything is ash, except the memory of her cafe, the way she smiled at every customer, the way she remembered their names, their orders, their stories. That was real. That mattered. The rest is just numbers in accounts I'll never empty. Bella traced the words with her finger. This was the key to understanding everything. Arthur hadn't left her a fortune because she cut his toast. He left it because she reminded him of Eleanor. Because in a world that had become cold and transactional, Bella had shown him that kindness without agenda still existed. That people who saw other people as human beings rather than opportunities were rare but real. She was carrying forward Eleanor's legacy. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders. What if she failed? What if she wasn't worthy of this trust? What if the money corrupted her the way it corrupted everyone else? But there was no time for self-doubt. The bank opened in 2 hours. She had a cashier's check to get, a mother to take care of, a diner to claim as her own. She dressed carefully. Not the uniform this time, the best clothes she owned. Black pants that weren't faded. A white blouse that had been dry cleaned once for a job interview 3 years ago. She looked at herself in the mirror. Not quite professional, but closer than she had been yesterday. The bank manager, Thomas Crawford, remembered her from the hundreds of times she had come in to deposit her meager tips or withdraw $20 for groceries. He had always been polite but distant, the way bank managers were with people who had more debt than assets. Today was different. Today, Marcus Davies had called ahead. Today, Bella had $5.25 million being transferred into an account that had held $67 yesterday. Thomas Crawford's entire demeanor changed. He ushered her into his private office, offered her coffee, real coffee from a machine that cost more than her rent. He sat across from her with a smile that was new, the smile of someone realizing they had underestimated a client. "Miss Rossi, I understand we'll be handling a substantial transfer for you." "Yes, and I need a cashier's check this morning, $92,000. She said the number and waited for the shock. the questions, the disbelief. But Thomas Crawford just nodded and made notes on his pad. Of course. For the nursing facility, I understand. We can have that ready within the hour. And I'd like to discuss our wealth management services if you have time. With assets of this size, you'll want professional guidance. Bella listened to him talk about investment strategies and tax optimization and estate planning. Words that meant nothing to her yesterday. Words that were now her reality. She signed papers, provided information, set up meetings with advisors. And through it all, she felt like she was watching someone else live her life. The cashier's check was ready 40 minutes later. A piece of paper worth more than everything she had earned in her lifetime. She held it carefully, like it might disintegrate if she gripped too hard. This piece of paper was her mother's future, her peace of mind, the end of 3 years of crushing anxiety. She went directly to Riverside Nursing Facility. The administrative offices were on the second floor. Margaret, the woman she had spoken to on the phone, looked up when Bella entered. Her eyes widened. "Miss Rossi, you actually came." "I said I would. People say a lot of things, especially about money." Margaret took the check, stared at it, looked up at Bella. "This is real?" "It's real." Margaret processed the payment in silence. Her fingers moved over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. But she kept glancing at Bella like she might vanish, like this might be an elaborate prank. Finally, she printed a receipt and slid it across the desk. "Your mother's account is paid in full, 24 months prepaid. Private room transfer will happen this afternoon. Is there anything else?" "Can I see her?" "Of course, she's in the common room." Bella found her mother in a wheelchair by the window. Sophia Rossi was 68 years old and looked 80. The stroke had aged her, stolen color from her skin and light from her eyes. But when she saw Bella, something sparked. Recognition. Not always. Sometimes she didn't remember. But today she did. "Isabella, you came." "Hi, Mama." Bella knelt beside the wheelchair, took her mother's hand. The skin was paper thin, spotted with age and IV marks. "I have good news. You're getting a new room, a private one, with a window that overlooks the garden. That's expensive. We can afford it now." Her mother's eyes searched Bella's face, looking for the worry that was always there, the exhaustion, the fear. She didn't find it. "What happened?" "Someone left me some money, a customer at the diner. He passed away and left me enough to take care of you, enough to take care of everything." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. "Oh, mija, that's a blessing." "It is. But blessings come with weight. Money changes people." "I know, Mama. I'll be careful." "No." Her mother's grip tightened, stronger than Bella expected. "Not careful. Be good. Stay good. That's what matters, not the money. Your heart." Bella hugged her mother carefully, the way you hug someone who might break. "I promise." She left the nursing facility feeling lighter than she had in years. Her mother was cared for. The debt was gone. But her mother's words echoed. Money changes people. Be good, stay good. The test wasn't receiving the inheritance. The test was what she did with it. She walked the 20 minutes to the Morning Glory diner. The afternoon sun was warm. Chicago in November could be bitter, but today was mild. A gift. She needed to face Sal, needed to face Brenda, needed to tell them that their broke coworker was now their boss. The thought made her stomach churn. The lunch rush was ending when she arrived. The bell chimed as she pushed through the door. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. Sal looked up from the grill. Brenda froze mid-pour with a coffee pot in hand. Frank was at his usual spot at the counter. Martha and June were in their booth. Old Man Johnson was demanding more hot sauce. Everything was normal. Everything was the same. Except Bella. She was different now, and everyone could sense it. Sal wiped his hands on his apron. "Bella," his voice was uncertain, like he didn't know what to call her anymore. "We heard. Frank said lawyers came yesterday, took you away in a fancy car." The rumor mill had been working overtime. Bella could see it in their faces. Curiosity, suspicion, envy, fear. She walked to the counter, set her bag down, looked at Sal, and then at Brenda, and then at everyone else who was pretending not to listen. "It's true. Mr. Ashford, the man who sat in booth 4, he passed away, and he left me some money." Brenda snorted. "Some money? That what they're calling it? You get enough for a new car, a vacation, what?" Bella took a breath. No point hiding it. They would find out anyway. "He left me $250,000. And he left me the diner. The silence was so complete, Bella could hear the coffee maker gurgling in the back. Sal's spatula slipped from his hand and clattered onto the grill. He left you the what? The diner. This diner. Bella pulled the documents from her bag, legal papers with official stamps and Marcus Davies' signature. According to this, you sold the Morning Glory 6 months ago to a company called AP Holdings for $800,000. You've been operating as a salaried manager since then. Sal's face went white. He sank onto a stool like his legs wouldn't hold him. AP Holdings. They approached me last spring, made an offer I couldn't refuse. More than this place was worth. I thought. He looked around the diner, at the worn booths and the cracked vinyl and the 30 years of his life baked into these walls. I thought they were going to tear it down, build condos. I took the money because I figured it was over anyway. You've been working for the old man this whole time, Brenda said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. And now you work for her. The absurdity of it hit everyone at once. Sal, who had owned this place for 30 years. Brenda, who had been here for 12. All the staff who had watched Bella struggle, who had seen her count her tips and take double shifts and wear the same 2 uniforms until they were threadbare. That Bella was now their boss. The world had turned upside down. Brenda set her coffee pot down with deliberate care. So what now, boss? The word dripped with venom. You going to fire us all, hire your friends, turn this into some fancy bistro? Every eye in the diner was on Bella. This was the moment. How she answered would define everything that came after. She could hear Arthur's voice in her head, Eleanor's voice from the journal entries. Kindness isn't weakness. Dignity isn't something you give conditionally. These people aren't assets to be managed. They're human beings who have lives and bills and fears just like you did yesterday. No one's getting fired. Bella's voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. Nothing is changing right now. Sal, you're the best grill cook in Chicago. You've kept this place running for 30 years. I don't know the first thing about running a diner. She looked at Brenda. You can handle a 6-table rush without breaking a sweat. The customers love you even when you're cranky. A few people chuckled. Even Brenda's mouth twitched. I'm going to need help, Bella continued. I'm going to need all of you, because this place works because of you, not because of who owns the deed. Sal looked up. Hope flickered in his eyes. What about me? You keeping me on? Keeping you on? Bella pulled out more papers. Numbers she had worked through with Gerald Chen that morning. Sal, your current salary is $42,000 a year. That's criminal for what you do. I'm raising it to $75,000, starting immediately. Sal stared. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Bella, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You've been underpaid for years, and I'm going to give everyone else raises too. 20% across the board. The kitchen staff who had been listening from the back emerged, cautious, disbelieving. One of them, Miguel, spoke up. 20%? For real? For real. You work hard. You deserve to be paid fairly. Brenda was watching Bella with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite hostile anymore, but not friendly either. What's your big plan? You going to change the menu, renovate, make this place unrecognizable? No, but I am going to buy a new coffee machine and a knife sharpener, and we're going to fix the air conditioning before summer. The tension in the room released like a sigh. These were the complaints they had been making for years, the small indignities of working in a place that was always one breakdown away from crisis. Hearing their new boss acknowledge them meant something, meant she was listening, meant she remembered what it was like to be them. Frank spoke up from the counter. So the old man was rich this whole time, sitting in that booth eating our eggs? He was, very rich. And he gave it to you, the girl who cut his toast. Frank shook his head. World's a strange place. It is, Bella agreed. The bell over the door chimed. A delivery driver stood there holding a slim package. Isabella Rossi? That's me. Sign here. Bella signed, took the package. It was from Sterling, Cromwell, and Davies. The return address embossed on expensive letterhead. She opened it while everyone watched. Inside was a small velvet box and a note in Marcus Davies' handwriting. Miss Rossi, Mr. Pendleton left instructions for this to be delivered to you at the diner. The enclosed key opens his private study at his residence. The address is below. I will meet you there at 4 o'clock today if you wish to see it. Respectfully, Monsieur Davies. Bella opened the velvet box. A brass key lay on a bed of white satin. old-fashioned, the kind that opened heavy doors in buildings that had been standing for a century. Under the key was a handwritten note, Arthur's shaky script. My dear Isabella, the money is for your freedom, the diner is for your heart, this key is for your future, it opens my private study. Go there. Understand why. An old man's final request. Arthur. Bella stared at the key. The metal was warm, like it had been waiting for her touch. A private study. What had Arthur left there? What else was there to understand beyond the journal and the inheritance and the impossibility of it all? What is it? Sal asked. A key to Mr. Ashford's apartment. He wants me to see his study. Brenda picked up her coffee pot, started her rounds again. Rich people and their secrets. Probably has a Rembrandt hanging on the wall or something. Bella didn't answer, but something told her Brenda might not be wrong. The address Marcus Davies had written was on Park Avenue, the kind of address that meant old money, the kind of building that had doormen who looked like retired generals and lobbies made of marble imported from Italy. Bella took a taxi. She could afford taxis now, could afford cars if she wanted them. The thought was still surreal. The building was exactly as intimidating as she feared. Pre-war limestone, brass fixtures polished to mirrors, a canopy that stretched to the curb. The doorman looked at her with the practiced neutrality of someone trained to assess worth at a glance. She didn't pass. Her clothes were better than yesterday, but still bargain store. Her shoes had been resoled twice. She looked like someone who didn't belong. Can I help you, miss? I'm here to see Marcus Davies. He's expecting me. The doorman's expression didn't change, but something shifted. Your name? Isabella Rossi. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly, listened, then nodded and hung up. Mr. Davies is waiting in the lobby. Go right in. The lobby was everything Bella had imagined, and worse. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art on the walls that probably cost more than the diner. Marcus Davies stood by the elevator in his perfect charcoal suit. He nodded when he saw her. Miss Rossi, thank you for coming. I should prepare you. Mr. Pendleton's apartment is substantial. How substantial? The entire penthouse floor. They rode the elevator in silence. It was wood-paneled and moved so smoothly Bella could barely tell they were rising. The numbers climbed, 20, 30, 40. They didn't stop until 68. The top floor. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, not into a hallway, into the apartment itself. Bella stepped out and forgot how to breathe. The space was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Central Park that looked like a painting. The fall colors, the paths winding through trees, the reservoir reflecting the afternoon sun. It was the kind of view people paid millions just to see from a balcony. Arthur had lived with it every day. But it wasn't the view that stopped Bella's heart. It was the art. The walls were covered with masterpieces. A Monet over the fireplace, water lilies in blues and greens so vivid they seemed to ripple, a Degas bronze on a pedestal, a dancer mid-leap, every muscle captured in metal, a Van Gogh self-portrait on the far wall, those tortured eyes staring out with intensity that made Bella want to look away and lean closer at the same time. She walked further into the apartment, her footsteps silent on Persian rugs worth more than cars, more art everywhere she looked, a small Vermeer, a woman reading a letter by a window, light and shadow playing across her face in ways that made her seem alive, a Rembrandt, an old man's portrait, every wrinkle, every age spot, every trace of a life lived, a Rothko, orange and yellow fields that vibrated with emotion, a Pollock. Chaos captured and framed and somehow beautiful. He was one of the world's most discreet art collectors, Marcus Davies said quietly. Very few people knew the extent of his collection. This represents perhaps $300 million worth of art, conservatively. Bella's artist heart was breaking. This was the world she had dreamed of in art school. These were the pieces she had studied in textbooks and written papers about, and stood in front of in museums. But Arthur had lived with them, had walked past them every day, had sat in this apartment surrounded by beauty that most people would never see. And still he had chosen to spend his mornings in a shabby diner. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why come to the morning glory when he had all this? Because this is just beauty, Miss Rossi. It's not life. It's not connection. It's not someone seeing you as human and caring if your hands shake. Marcus Davies looked around the apartment. This is a gilded cage. Arthur lived here for 40 years after Eleanor died, surrounded by priceless art, alone. The silence in this place would drive most people mad. The apartment was immaculate, every surface polished, every piece of furniture placed with design precision. But it felt empty, sterile. There were no family photos, no clutter, no signs that anyone actually lived here. Just art and elegant furniture, and a view that made Bella's chest ache. The study is this way. Marcus Davies led her down a long hallway. The carpet was thick enough to absorb sound, more art on the walls, pieces that would make collectors weep. But Bella barely noticed now. She was focused on the door at the end of the hall. Heavy oak, old-fashioned lock, the kind that required the brass key she carried in her pocket. He gave me a sealed envelope when he updated the will. Instructions to open it only upon his death and to grant you access. This room was forbidden to everyone. His cleaning staff weren't allowed inside. His doctor never saw it. Diana and Caleb certainly never did. This was his sanctuary, his real home, and he's trusting you with it. Marcus Davies stepped back. I'll wait out here. This is for you alone. Bella's hand shook as she pulled the key from her pocket. The brass was warm. She inserted it into the lock. It turned smoothly, well-oiled, recently used. The door swung open and Bella stepped inside. The study was completely different from the rest of the apartment. Where the other rooms were pristine and cold, this was warm and lived in. Books crammed every shelf, floor to ceiling, leather spines worn from handling, classics, philosophy, history, business, art, a collection built over decades by someone who read deeply and thought carefully. A leather armchair sat by a fireplace. The leather was worn smooth, the shape of Arthur's body pressed into the cushions. This was where he sat, where he thought, where he was himself without performance or pretense. The air smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco and lemon oil, scents that had soaked into the wood and fabric over years. The room felt alive in a way the rest of the apartment didn't. This was where Arthur had lived, where his mind had worked, where he had planned and remembered and grieved. But what dominated the room was the wall behind the desk. A corkboard stretched from floor to ceiling, at least 12 feet wide and 8 feet tall. It was covered with a complex web of photographs and documents and newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. Colored strings connected everything, red and blue and green and yellow, a strategic map, a general's command center, a life's work displayed in careful detail. Bella stepped closer, tried to make sense of the web, and then she saw the center, a woman's face. The photograph was large, 8 by 10, prominent placement, right in the middle of everything. A woman laughing on a checkered blanket in a park. She was beautiful in an unaffected way. Kind eyes, warm smile, joy radiating from her like light. Next to it was another photograph, the same woman standing proudly in front of a small storefront. A sign above her head read, Eleanor's Corner Cafe. She wore an apron and held a coffee pot and looked like someone who had found her purpose. A third photograph showed a wedding, young Arthur and Eleanor on the steps of a church. He was looking at her like she hung the moon. She was laughing at the camera, pure love captured and frozen in silver gelatin. Bella's throat tightened. This was Eleanor, Arthur's wife, the woman whose legacy Bella was supposed to carry forward. She looked kind, the kind of person who would cut someone's toast without being asked, who would remember people's names and orders and stories, who would see every customer as deserving of dignity. Newspaper clippings surrounded the photographs. Bella leaned in to read them. The headlines made her stomach drop. Beloved restaurateur Arthur Pendleton dies in car accident. The article was dated October 15, 1987. Bella did the math, 38 years ago. Eleanor had been 49 years old. The article described a single car accident, brake failure. Her car went off the road and hit a tree. She died instantly. Police investigated but found no evidence of foul play. Just a tragic malfunction that took a good woman too soon. More clippings. These told a story that made Bella's skin crawl. Eleanor's Corner Cafe chain files for bankruptcy, dated 6 months after Eleanor's death. The article explained that Eleanor had expanded her single cafe to 5 locations in the New York area. Small places, neighborhood spots where people felt welcome. But after her death, a corporate investor named Harrison Vance had called in all the outstanding loans simultaneously, forced bankruptcy, bought the chain for pennies on the dollar. Corporate raider Harrison Vance acquires bankrupt restaurant chain. A photograph showed Vance, mid-40s, slicked hair, predatory smile. The kind of man who saw businesses as prey and bankruptcy as opportunity. He had systematically destroyed Eleanor's dream and profited from it. But the story didn't end there. Pendleton Global announces hostile takeover of Vance Industries. Dated 2003, 15 years after Eleanor's death. Arthur had gone to war, spent years positioning himself, buying shares, forming alliances, then struck with precision that left Vance no defense, took his company apart piece by piece. Harrison Vance dies bankrupt and alone. 2005, a small article on page 8 of the business section. Vance had lost everything. His company, his reputation, his wealth. He died in a rented room with no family at his bedside. The article noted that his downfall was engineered by Arthur Pendleton in what many saw as revenge for Eleanor's death. Bella stepped back from the board. The scope of it took her breath away. Arthur had spent 18 years destroying the man who destroyed Eleanor's dream, had been methodical, patient, ruthless. He had won. Vance was dead and disgraced. Revenge complete. But at what cost? She looked at other sections of the board, found one dedicated to Caleb. Photographs of him on yachts, in nightclubs, with models, living a life funded by inheritance and free from consequence. Financial documents showed failed ventures, a tech startup that lost $30 million, bad investments, worse judgment, checks from Arthur paying gambling debts, $2.1 million over 5 years. Arthur's handwriting on a note pinned below. He has her name. Eleanor Catherine Pendleton was his grandmother, but he has none of her heart. None of her character. This grieves me more than I can say. My son was a good man. How did his son turn out so empty? Bella felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders. Caleb wasn't just spoiled. He was a disappointment so profound it had broken Arthur's heart. The family line that should have carried Eleanor's legacy had produced someone who embodied everything she wasn't. Greed, entitlement, selfishness. And Arthur couldn't give him control without betraying everything Eleanor had stood for. Her eyes found another section, recent additions, photographs that hadn't yellowed yet. One made her heart stop. It was her, a candid shot taken from across the street. Bella outside the Morning Glory on her break, smiling at something on her phone. She looked tired. The uniform was faded, but she was smiling, a real smile, not the manufactured one for customers. Just joy in a small moment. Pinned next to the photograph was a note in Arthur's shaky handwriting. She has Eleanor's heart. This is what matters. Not blood, not name, heart. I have watched her for 17 months. Every day she chooses kindness when the world gives her nothing back. Every day she sees people, really sees them. Eleanor would have loved her, and I believe she can do what I could not. Let go of revenge. Build something beautiful instead. She is my last hope, my legacy, not Caleb, her. Tears streamed down Bella's face. She couldn't stop them, didn't try. Arthur hadn't just left her money. He had left her his faith, his belief that she could be what his family wasn't, that she could take the ashes of his revenge and Eleanor's stolen dreams and somehow create something that honored them both. The weight of it was crushing. What if she failed? What if she wasn't strong enough? What if Caleb came after her and won? What if the money corrupted her the way it had corrupted him? She walked to Arthur's desk. Her legs were unsteady. There was a sealed envelope on the leather blotter, addressed to her in Arthur's handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a stock certificate, 1 share of Pendleton Global Holdings, and a letter. Isabella, knowledge is power. This single share gives you legal right to attend the annual shareholder meeting on March 15th, 3 weeks from today. Caleb will be there. He will attempt to seize control of the board. He believes this is his birthright. He believes you are nobody. Prove him wrong. Everything you need is in this room. The files, the journals, the truth about what kind of man he is versus what kind of man I tried to be. I was not a good man, Isabella. I spent 20 years on revenge. It consumed me. It made me cold. I built an empire but lost my soul. Eleanor would be disappointed in what I became. But perhaps she would approve of what I'm trying to do now. Give someone with her heart the tools to build something better. Don't fight him with hate. Fight him with Eleanor's way. Kindness backed by strength. Truth wrapped in grace. The shareholders will expect a corporate battle. Give them something better. Give them a vision of what Pendleton Global could be if it had a heart again. I believe in you. Eleanor would have believed in you, your friend Arthur. Your friend. Bella set the letter down, looked around the study. Files lined the shelves. Documentation of everything. Caleb's failures, Arthur's strategies, the company structure, board member profiles, financial projections. This wasn't just a study. It was an arsenal. Arthur had given her every weapon she would need to fight the battle ahead, and he had given her 3 weeks to learn how to use them. She walked back to the corkboard, stood in front of Eleanor's laughing face. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough, but I promise I'll try. For Arthur. For you. For everyone who believed that places where people feel seen and valued matter more than profit margins. The photograph didn't answer, but Bella felt something shift in the room, like a blessing given, like permission granted, like two people who had lost everything were somehow watching and hoping she wouldn't let them down. She left the study and found Marcus Davies in the hallway. He looked at her face and understood without asking. He showed you Eleanor. He showed me everything. And I have 3 weeks to figure out how to fight a corporate shark with nothing but a kind heart and an old man's faith. Marcus Davies almost smiled. That's more than most people go to battle with. And for what it's worth, I've known Arthur Pendleton for 43 years. He was never wrong about people. If he believed in you, then you have everything you need. Bella wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the confidence he seemed to have, but all she felt was terrified. Caleb had money and lawyers and experience, and the unshakable belief that he deserved everything. She had a journal and a study full of files and a name she was supposed to live up to. It didn't feel like enough, but it would have to be, because the alternative was letting Arthur and Eleanor down, letting their dreams die, letting Caleb win through entitlement and rage, and that was something Bella wouldn't do. She walked out of Arthur's apartment building into the afternoon sun. The city moved around her, people rushing, cars honking, life continuing without pause. She had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to learn a world she didn't understand. 3 weeks to become someone strong enough to stand in front of hundreds of shareholders and convince them that a waitress deserved to be heard. 3 weeks to prove that kindness wasn't weakness, that character mattered more than pedigree, that Eleanor's legacy was worth fighting for. The brass key was warm in her pocket, a talisman. A reminder, a promise she had made to ghosts in a study that smelled like pipe tobacco and old books. She would go back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until the meeting. She would read every file, study every document, learn every weakness in Caleb's armor. And when the day came, she would walk into that boardroom and fight for something bigger than herself. For Arthur, for Eleanor, for everyone who had ever been dismissed as unimportant because they didn't have the right name or the right clothes or the right bank account. She would fight, and somehow, impossibly, she would find a way to win. The next 3 weeks became a blur of 2 lives lived simultaneously. By day, Bella was at the Morning Glory Diner learning what it meant to own a business. By night, she was in Arthur's study learning what it meant to fight a war in boardrooms instead of battlefields. Sleep became something she grabbed in 4-hour increments. Coffee became a necessity rather than a pleasure. And every morning when she woke up, she had to remind herself that this was real, that she owned a diner and $5 million, and a responsibility that felt heavier than both combined. The diner came first. It had to. These were her people now, Sal and Brenda and Miguel and the 2 line cooks whose names she had barely known before, but now committed to memory. Carlos and James. They had families, bills, lives that depended on this place staying open and profitable. Arthur had trusted her with their livelihoods. She couldn't fail them. The back office became her classroom. Sal taught her the basics with the patience of a man who had spent 30 years learning them himself. Profit and loss statements, food cost percentages, inventory management, vendor negotiations, health code requirements, payroll taxes, workers' compensation insurance, the 1,000 small details that separated a successful restaurant from one that closed within a year. The margins are thin, Sal explained on the 3rd day. He had spreadsheets open on a laptop that had seen better days. We're making about $8,000 a month profit after expenses. That's tight. One bad month and we're losing money. One health code violation that shuts us down for a week, and we're done. Bella studied the numbers. She had never been good at math, had dropped out of art school before the required accounting class. But these numbers mattered. They represented whether her employees could pay their rent, whether the diner survived, whether Arthur's faith in her was justified. What if we had a buffer? She asked. What if money wasn't the constraint? Sal looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. Then we'd fix the equipment before it breaks instead of after. Buy better ingredients. Pay the staff what they deserve instead of what we can afford. Actually compete with the chains instead of just surviving. Then that's what we'll do. The first change was wages. She sat down with each employee individually, asked them what they needed, not what they wanted, what they needed. Brenda admitted she was working a second job at a convenience store 4 nights a week. The raise Bella offered meant she could quit that job, could see her teenagers before they went to bed, could stop feeling like she was drowning. "Why are you doing this?" Brenda asked. The hostility in her voice had faded, but suspicion remained. "You don't have to pay us more. We'll work for what we're getting now." "Because Arthur taught me something. People aren't expenses to be minimized. They're the reason any of this matters. And if I'm going to honor his memory, I need to do better than just keeping the lights on." Brenda's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, cleared her throat. "Well, don't expect me to start being nice just because you're paying me more. I wouldn't dream of it." But Brenda did start being different. Not nice exactly, but protective. When customers were rude to Bella, Brenda shut it down with the kind of sharp efficiency that came from years of dealing with entitled people. When Bella made mistakes, and she made plenty, Brenda corrected her quietly instead of loudly. And one morning, when Bella was running on 3 hours of sleep and burned herself on the coffee machine, Brenda appeared with burn cream and a look that dared anyone to comment. "You're too useful to damage," Brenda said. "Can't have you breaking down before you finish fixing this place." It was the closest thing to affection Bella had received from her. She took it as the gift it was. The equipment upgrades came next. The coffee machine died on a Tuesday morning during the breakfast rush. Just gave up. Decades of overuse finally catching up. The old Bella would have panicked, called repair services, begged them to come immediately, prayed the cost wouldn't bankrupt her. The new Bella pulled out her phone and ordered a commercial-grade La Marzocco machine, $8,000, delivered and installed the next day. The staff stood around it like it was a religious artifact. Miguel reached out to touch the gleaming chrome, then pulled his hand back like it might burn him. "Boss, this is the kind of machine fancy places have. We're a fancy place now, we just don't act fancy." The coffee quality improved overnight. Customers noticed, started ordering second cups, third cups. Word spread. The Morning Glory's coffee was suddenly worth the trip. Revenue ticked up, small increases, but increases that mattered. Then came the air conditioning crisis. It happened during an unexpected heat wave in late November, climate change making weather unpredictable. The ancient AC unit that had been limping along for years finally gave up, died with a groan and a puff of black smoke that set off the fire alarm. The kitchen became an oven. The dining room became unbearable. Customers started leaving. Staff were sweating through their shirts within an hour. Brenda threw her apron on the counter at noon. "That's it. I'm done. I can't work in a sauna. I quit." The old Bella would have begged. The new Bella nodded. "You're right. This is unacceptable." Brenda had been halfway to the door. She stopped, turned around. "What?" "You're right. No one should have to work in these conditions." Bella pulled out her phone. "I'm calling an emergency HVAC service right now. We'll have a new system installed by tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Boss, that's going to cost a fortune. Rush installation, premium unit, you're looking at 20-something thousand easy." "Then it costs 20-something thousand. You're worth it. This place is worth it. And I'm not asking anyone to suffer because I'm cheap." Brenda stared. The other staff had gathered, watching this exchange, waiting to see what kind of boss Bella would be when tested. Miguel spoke up. "You're really going to spend 20 grand to keep us comfortable?" "I'm going to spend whatever it takes to treat you like human beings who deserve dignity. That's not negotiable." The HVAC company came that afternoon, had the new system installed by 6 p.m., $22,000. Bella didn't blink. The next morning, the diner was cool and comfortable. Brenda came back to work without a word, but she started calling Bella boss without sarcasm. started defending her to the other staff when they questioned decisions, started watching out for her the way people watch out for someone they've decided is worth protecting. Loyalty couldn't be bought, but it could be earned. Bella was learning the difference. Her nights were spent in Arthur's study, becoming a different kind of student. Marcus Davies arrived at 6 p.m. 3 times a week, stayed until 11 or midnight, taught her corporate structure the way a patient professor taught a struggling freshman. The lessons were dense, complex, but Davies was a good teacher, and Bella was a desperate student. Pendleton Global is a manufacturing conglomerate, he explained on the first night. They sat in Arthur's leather chairs by the fireplace. Davies had brought financial reports and organizational charts. Founded in 1962 by Arthur when he was 27, started as a small machine shop, grew into something much larger. Industrial equipment, aerospace components, commercial machinery, 47,000 employees worldwide, traded on the New York Stock Exchange, currently valued at $12 billion. Bella tried to wrap her mind around $12 billion, failed. The numbers were too large, too abstract. And Arthur owned what percentage? The Ashford family owns 35% through various trusts. That's controlling interest. But here's what you need to understand. The company is run by a board of directors, 12 people. They make the major strategic decisions, hire and fire the CEO, approve mergers and acquisitions, determine dividend policy. Everything significant goes through the board. And the board is split. Exactly. Davies pulled out a chart with 12 names and photographs. 4 members are loyal to Arthur's vision, old guard. Men and women in their 60s and 70s who built this company alongside him. They remember what he stood for: integrity, long-term thinking, treating employees as assets, not expenses. He pointed to another section. 3 members are loyal to Caleb. These were friends of his father. They think the grandson should inherit leadership. They're motivated by old loyalties and probably some promises Caleb has made about board compensation. And the other 5? Independents. They care about one thing: shareholder value, profit, stock price. They'll vote for whoever convinces them can make the company more money. They're the swing votes. If Caleb can convince them he'll increase profits, he wins. If we can convince them stability and long-term vision matter more than quick gains, we might have a chance. Bella studied the faces. 12 strangers who would decide whether Caleb got control of a company worth billions. 12 people who had no reason to listen to a waitress from a diner. What's Caleb's strategy? He's going to call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, George Riley. Good man, competent, but not charismatic, not visionary. He's been holding things steady, but the stock price is down 12% this year. That's ammunition for Caleb. He'll argue that the company is stagnant, that it needs bold new leadership, that a Pendleton should be running Pendleton Global. And if he wins? If he wins the no-confidence vote, he'll nominate himself as CEO and chairman. With his 3 allies and possibly the independents, he might have the votes. And then he'll run the company into the ground within 5 years. Not through malice, through incompetence. Arthur spent the last 2 years documenting every one of Caleb's failures. Every bad investment, every reckless decision. The man has good instincts for self-promotion, but terrible judgment for business. Davies handed Bella a thick folder. This is everything Arthur compiled. Tech startup that lost $30 million. Real estate venture that went bankrupt. Cryptocurrency scheme that was barely legal. Pattern of gambling, drinking, associates with questionable ethics. He's a disaster waiting for control of a nuclear reactor. Bella opened the folder. Page after page of documentation. Arthur had been thorough, obsessive, every failure cataloged, every debt paid, every intervention necessary to keep Caleb from destroying himself. So we just show this to the board. It's not that simple. Caleb can claim these were learning experiences, youthful mistakes. He can argue that he's matured, that he deserves a chance to prove himself. And the board might buy it. Might decide that family loyalty matters more than track record, especially if the alternative is continuing with a CEO they see as uninspiring. So what do we do? Marcus Davies leaned back in his chair. The firelight played across his face, made him look older, tired, but sharp. We need a different strategy. We can't just defend George Riley. We need to give the shareholders something better, something that makes Caleb's motion irrelevant. They worked through the options, late into the night. Multiple sessions. Bella learned about proxy battles and shareholder proposals in corporate governance, learned about the careful dance of boardroom politics, how to read voting patterns and predict alliances, how to find leverage in places that seemed powerless. And slowly a plan began to form. But then Caleb made his move. The article appeared on a Thursday morning in the Chicago Tribune business section. Not the front page, but prominent. "Questions surround Pendleton inheritance," read the headline. Below it was a photograph of Bella walking into Arthur's apartment building, taken from across the street. She looked out of place, a woman in bargain store clothes entering a building where apartments cost millions. The article was carefully worded. Nothing directly libelous, but full of implications in anonymous sources. It suggested that Bella had targeted Arthur, that she had known who he was, that their relationship might have been inappropriate. It questioned Arthur's mental state in his final year, quoted family sources expressing concern about elder abuse. The quotes were obviously from Diana and Caleb, though they weren't named. "My father-in-law was a brilliant man, but in his final year, he became increasingly isolated and possibly vulnerable to manipulation. We're exploring all legal options to honor what we believe were his true wishes." Bella read the article 3 times. Each time felt like a punch to the gut. She was being called a gold digger, a manipulator, someone who preyed on vulnerable old men for money. The opposite of everything she was, everything she had tried to be. The fallout was immediate. The article was picked up by business websites, shared on social media, comment sections filled with strangers judging her. Most assumed guilt. She was young and he was rich, and that was enough. Some defended her, said innocent until proven guilty. But they were drowned out by the assumption that she must have done something wrong to deserve this kind of money. The next morning, she walked into the diner and felt the change immediately. Customers stared, whispered behind their hands. Some looked at her with disgust, others with pity. Frank didn't make eye contact. Martha and June huddled in their booth talking in voices that carried. "Can you believe it? I always thought she seemed too good to be true." Poor old man probably didn't know what hit him. Bella wanted to hide, wanted to run, wanted to stand on a table and scream the truth at everyone. But she did none of those things. She tied on her apron, poured coffee, took orders, kept her head up and her expression neutral. If she broke now, Caleb won. If she showed weakness, everyone would believe the story he was telling. Brenda appeared at her elbow during the lunch rush, took the coffee pot from her hands. "Go to the back office, now." "I'm fine." "You're shaking. Go to the back, I've got this." In the back office, Bella let herself feel it. The injustice, the rage, the helplessness of being lied about and having no way to fight back. She wanted to call Marcus Davies, wanted to sue for libel, wanted to make Caleb pay for turning her kindness into something ugly. Her phone rang. Davies, as if summoned by thought. "I've seen the article. I know this is difficult, but you cannot respond. Do not issue a statement. Do not engage with reporters. Do not post on social media. Silence is your best strategy." "How can silence be strategy? He's destroying my reputation. People think I'm a criminal." "People will think whatever they want to think regardless of what you say. If you deny it, they'll say you're defensive. If you explain, though, they'll twist your words. The only way to win this is to rise above it. Let your actions speak. Let the truth come out at the shareholder meeting where it matters. Everything else is distraction." "I don't know if I can do that." "You can, because you're stronger than he is, and because you know the truth. Hold on to that. Let him waste his energy on PR battles. You focus on the real war." Bella hung up, sat in the office surrounded by filing cabinets and the smell of industrial cleaner, tried to believe that silence was strength, that rising above meant something, that this pain was temporary. There was a knock on the door. Brenda entered without waiting for permission. She was carrying 2 mugs of coffee, set one in front of Bella. "You going to quit?" "No." "Good, because we need you. And anyone who believes that garbage in the paper is an idiot. I've worked with you for 3 years. You're the most honest person I've ever met. Too honest. You apologize to customers even when they're wrong. You cover shifts for people without complaining. You give your lunch to the homeless guy who sits outside even though you're broke. That article is lies." "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't let them win. Caleb wants you to break, wants you to give up and go away. Don't give him the satisfaction." After Brenda left, Bella sat with her coffee and felt something harden in her chest. Resolve, determination, anger channeled into purpose. Caleb thought she would crumble under pressure, thought a waitress with no experience would fold when the real players showed up. He was wrong. She had spent 3 years working doubles while drowning in debt and never quit. Had watched her mother lose everything to a stroke and found ways to keep going. Had dreams crushed and still got up every morning. She was stronger than he knew, stronger than she had known, and she was going to prove it. The support came from unexpected places. The regular customers, the ones who actually knew her, started defending her. Frank left a $10 tip on a $6 breakfast with a note, "Don't let the bastards get you down." Martha and June came in the next day and made a point of sitting in her section, ordered extra, tipped extra, told anyone who would listen that they'd known Bella for years and the article was character assassination. Old Man Johnson, who never tipped and never said thank you, left her a $5 bill with his own note in shaky handwriting. "My wife died 30 years ago. Waitress at the diner on Halstead was kind to me after. Some people understand grief, you do. That man saw it. Don't apologize for being decent." The notes made her cry, the good kind of tears, the kind that said she wasn't alone, that people who mattered saw the truth. And then Dr. Alistair Finch appeared. He came to the diner on a Saturday afternoon, an elderly man in an expensive coat, distinguished, professorial. He asked for Bella specifically. She came to his table nervous, wondering if this was a reporter, a lawyer for Caleb, another attack. "I'm Alistair Finch, Arthur Pendleton's physician. May I speak with you privately?" They sat in the back office. Dr. Finch had kind eyes, the eyes of someone who had seen a lot of suffering and learned to be gentle with people. "I've seen what Caleb is doing, the media campaign, the implications about Arthur's mental state. I want you to know that they're lies, and I have proof." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. Medical records, neurological assessments, psychiatric evaluations. All from Arthur's final year, all showing perfect cognitive function. No signs of dementia, no diminished capacity, no evidence that he was vulnerable to manipulation. The reports were detailed, professional, unimpeachable. "Arthur asked me to preserve these specifically to defend you. He knew Caleb would claim he was senile. He wanted you to have the ammunition to fight back. These evaluations are dated, signed by 3 independent physicians, 2 neurologists, 1 psychiatrist. All will testify if needed that Arthur Pendleton was of completely sound mind until his final week when the illness took him quickly." Bella looked at the documents, at the proof that Arthur had been protecting her even after death. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "Because Arthur was my friend for 40 years. And because he told me about you. He said you reminded him of his wife, of kindness that doesn't calculate return. He was the best judge of character I ever knew. If he trusted you with his legacy, then that's good enough for me. And I'll stand with you against Caleb, in court if necessary. At the shareholder meeting, certainly, you're not alone in this." Not. The words broke something open in Bella's chest. She wasn't alone. Marcus Davies was helping her. Dr. Finch was defending her. The diner staff was protecting her. Regular customers were supporting her. She had been so focused on the attack she hadn't noticed she was building an army. That weekend, Marcus Davies called an emergency meeting. Bella, Dr. Finch, and Gerald Chen, the financial advisor who had managed Arthur's accounts for 20 years. They gathered in Arthur's study, sat around the desk where Arthur had planned his revenge against Harrison Vance, where he had documented Caleb's failures, where he had written his final letter to Bella. "We have 3 days until the shareholder meeting," Davies said. "We need a final strategy. The medical records prove Arthur was competent. The financial records prove Caleb is reckless. But that's defensive. We're playing not to lose. We need to play to win." "What does winning look like?" Dr. Finch asked. "Making Caleb's motion irrelevant, giving the shareholders something so compelling they don't care about the no-confidence vote, something that reframes what Pendleton Global stands for." They talked through options, debated approaches, and then Bella remembered something Arthur had written in his journal. Not in the entries about her, in an entry from 5 years ago. "Eleanor always said business should build people up, not just extract value from them. The companies that last, that mean something, they're the ones that understand profit isn't the only metric that matters." Bella looked up at the 3 men. What if we propose something that makes the company about more than just profit? What if we give them a vision of Pendleton Global as a company that builds communities, that invests in people? Like what? Chen asked. The idea crystallized as she spoke. A foundation, the Pendleton Legacy Foundation, funded by 10% of the company's annual profits, dedicated to supporting small businesses, educational scholarships, community programs, everything Arthur and Eleanor believed in. Davies leaned forward. That's over $100 million a year. Exactly. It's significant. It positions the company as a leader in corporate responsibility. ESG matters to institutional investors now. This puts Pendleton Global at the forefront, makes them more than just a manufacturer, makes them a force for good. And where do you fit in this? Dr. Finch asked. I run the foundation. As an independent director, I'm not asking for a seat on the board, not asking for operational control, just asking to be the custodian of Arthur's real legacy. His belief that businesses should serve people, not just shareholders. The room was quiet. Davies was thinking. Chen was reviewing numbers on his tablet. Dr. Finch was smiling. Arthur would love this. It's exactly what Eleanor would have done. Use the wealth to build instead of just accumulate. Davies nodded slowly. It could work, if you present it correctly. If you make the board see that this isn't charity, it's strategy. That companies with strong ESG profiles attract better employees, better customers, better investors. That this makes business sense in addition to being the right thing to do. Can you do that? Chen asked Bella. Can you stand in front of 200 people and make that case? Bella thought about the last 3 weeks. Learning the business, earning her staff's respect, facing down Caleb's attacks without breaking, building something at the diner worth fighting for. She thought about Arthur's faith in her, Eleanor's legacy, the weight of responsibility that had felt crushing, and now felt more like purpose. I can try. Trying isn't good enough, Davies said, but his voice was gentle. You need to walk into that room believing you belong there, believing that a waitress who cuts toast for an old man has as much right to speak about corporate values as someone born into wealth. Can you do that? Bella looked at Eleanor's photograph on the corkboard, at the woman who had built a cafe empire through kindness, who had lost everything and never became bitter, who had believed feeding people with dignity mattered more than profit margins. If Eleanor could do that in the 1950s as a woman with no pedigree and no connections, then Bella could do this. Yes, I can do that. They spent the rest of the weekend preparing. Davies coached her on presentation, how to stand, how to speak, how to make eye contact without seeming aggressive, how to project confidence without arrogance. Dr. Finch gave her the medical records to study, prepared her for questions about Arthur's competence. Gerald Chen walked her through the financial projections, showed her how to present the foundation as economically viable. By Sunday night, Bella had a speech memorized, had answers prepared for likely attacks, had a vision she believed in, and had something she hadn't possessed 3 weeks ago. Faith in herself. Not unshakable faith, not the kind that eliminated fear, but enough faith to walk into that boardroom and fight. Marcus Davies walked her out to the car. The bodyguards were waiting to drive her home. Are you ready? I'm terrified. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake, but don't let it stop you. Arthur believed you were ready. I believe it too. And tomorrow you're going to prove it. Bella got into the car, watched the city slide past the tinted windows. 3 days, 72 hours. And then she would stand in front of the most powerful people in Chicago business and tell them that a waitress from a diner deserved to be heard. That kindness had value, that Eleanor's legacy mattered, that Arthur's faith wasn't misplaced. She didn't know if she would win, but she knew she would fight. And that was enough. It had to be enough, because the alternative was letting Caleb win through entitlement and rage, was letting Arthur and Eleanor down, was proving that the world was exactly as cynical as it seemed. She wouldn't do that, couldn't do that. She had come too far, changed too much, become someone stronger than the broke art student who poured coffee and cut toast and expected nothing in return. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who owned a business and managed millions and carried the dreams of 2 people she had never met but loved anyway. Someone who had learned that power didn't corrupt if you remembered why you had it. That wealth wasn't the enemy if you used it to build instead of just accumulate. That legacy wasn't about what you left behind, but what you enabled others to become. Arthur had given her 3 gifts: money for her freedom, the diner for her heart, and faith that she could be better than she believed possible. She had accepted the first 2. Tomorrow she would prove she deserved the third. The car pulled up to her apartment building. The bodyguard said goodnight. Bella climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment one last time as the person she had been. Tomorrow, she would become someone else. Someone brave enough to stand in front of sharks and tell them about kindness. Someone foolish enough to believe it might work. She fell asleep with Eleanor's photograph in her mind. That smile, that certainty that people mattered more than profit, that joy in doing work that fed souls as well as bodies. If she could carry even a fraction of that into the boardroom, she might have a chance. And if she failed, at least she would fail while trying to honor something beautiful, while fighting for something worth more than money, while proving that the quiet old man in booth 4 had seen something in her worth believing in. That was all anyone could ask, all she could give. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like enough. The morning of the shareholder meeting arrived with unexpected clarity. No rain, no clouds, just crisp March sunlight that made Chicago look like a city in a photograph. Bella woke at 5 a.m. without an alarm. Her body knew. Today was the day. 3 weeks of preparation. 3 weeks of learning and fighting and becoming someone she hadn't known she could be. All of it came down to the next 6 hours. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The professional stylist Marcus Davies had sent had done their work yesterday. Her hair was cut and styled, simple, elegant, not trying to be something she wasn't, but presenting the best version of herself. The navy suit fit perfectly, tailored to her frame. She looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms, like someone worth listening to. But inside she was still terrified, still the broke waitress who counted tips and wore duct-tape sneakers. The fear hadn't gone away. She had just learned to carry it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sal. "Go show them what you're made of, boss. We're all rooting for you." Another from Brenda. "Remember, you're tougher than they think. Prove it." One from her mother's nurse. "Your mom is having a good morning. She says to tell you she's proud. Win or lose, you've already made her proud." Bella's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back. No crying. Not yet. Save it for after. Whatever after looked like. She made coffee. The good kind. French press. Beans that cost more than she used to spend on groceries for a week. Sat at her kitchen table with Arthur's journal one last time. Read the final entry again. "Build something beautiful from the ashes of my revenge. Carry Eleanor's light forward. You have her heart. That is worth more than any fortune." She closed the journal, set it beside Eleanor's photograph that she had brought from the study. 2 people she had never met in life but knew better than most people she passed on the street. They had given her everything. Today she would try to honor that gift. The bodyguards arrived at 7. The Lincoln Continental waited at the curb. Marcus Davies sat in the back seat already. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Are you ready?" "I don't think I'll ever feel ready, but I'm going anyway." That's all readiness is, showing up when you're terrified. The drive to Pendleton Global Tower took 25 minutes through morning traffic. Bella watched the city wake up, people going to work, living normal lives, not knowing that in a few hours she would either vindicate an old man's faith or prove that cynicism was justified after all. The tower was glass and steel, reaching 62 stories into the sky. The lobby was marble and chrome, and the kind of quiet that came from wealth, so old it didn't need to announce itself. Security waved them through. The elevator rose in silence. 40, 50, 60. Executive floor. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with photographs. The history of Pendleton Global. Arthur as a young man in 1962. Standing in front of his first machine shop. Arthur shaking hands with a governor. Arthur cutting a ribbon at a factory opening. Arthur accepting an award. 50 years of building something from nothing. And at the end of the hall, the most recent photograph. Arthur at 80, standing in front of the company headquarters. His expression was proud but distant, like he was looking at something that had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. The boardroom doors were oak, heavy, old-fashioned. They swung open silently on well-oiled hinges. The room beyond was designed to intimidate. A massive U-shaped table dominated the center. Leather chairs for the board of directors. Behind them, tiered seating for shareholders and observers. Easily 200 people, media in the back, cameras from Bloomberg and CNBC. This was news, the contested inheritance, the family drama, the waitress who thought she deserved a voice. Bella's entrance caused a ripple. Conversations paused, heads turned. She felt every eye assess her, judge her, dismiss her. She was so obviously out of place. Everyone else wore the uniform of corporate power. She wore a suit that was nice but not designer. She walked with confidence that was manufactured, not born. She was an imposter, and everyone knew it. Marcus Davies led her to the front row, shareholder seating. He sat beside her. Dr. Finch was already there, 2 seats down. He nodded, a small gesture of support. Across the aisle, Diana and Caleb sat with their lawyers. But something was different about Caleb this morning. The confident swagger was there, but underneath Bella caught something else. Dark circles under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth, the look of someone who hadn't slept, who had been up all night preparing or drinking or both. For just a moment their eyes met, and what she saw wasn't just hatred. It was desperation. The look of someone who needed this win not just for ego, but for survival. Diana leaned over to whisper something to him. Her hand gripped his arm. Not supportive, controlling, demanding. Bella looked away. Whatever family dynamics were playing out there were none of her business. The board members filed in, 12 men and women in their 50s and 60s and 70s, faces lined with decades of decisions that shaped thousands of lives. They took their seats with the practiced efficiency of people who did this often. Bella recognized them from the photographs Marcus Davies had shown her. Walter Freeman, the oldest, Arthur's friend from the beginning, Patricia Chen, the independent who cared only about returns, David Morrison, Caleb's ally, all the players in a game Bella was only beginning to understand. George Riley entered last, the current CEO. Bella had met him once during her preparation weeks. He was 58, gray at the temples, with the kind face of a man who had spent his career building teams rather than empires. He carried a folder, but his shoulders were squared. Whatever Caleb thought, this man wasn't going down without a fight. He caught Bella's eye and nodded, a small acknowledgement. They were allies today, whether either of them had planned it. The chairman called the meeting to order at 9 a.m. exactly. His name was Robert Sterling, neutral party, professional moderator. He had the voice of someone used to running meetings where billions were discussed. Welcome to the annual shareholder meeting of Pendleton Global Holdings. We have a full agenda today: financial reports, strategic initiatives, and several motions that require board votes. Let's begin. The first hour was dense. Financial presentations, PowerPoint slides full of graphs and projections, revenue up 3%, costs down 2%, margins holding steady. George Riley presented with quiet competence, not flashy, but thorough. He acknowledged the stock price decline but contextualized it against market conditions, showed how the company had maintained profitability while competitors struggled, outlined long-term investments in automation and workforce development that would pay dividends in 5 years, not 5 quarters. "We're playing the long game," Riley said. His voice was steady, confident without arrogance. "Short-term stock movements matter, but what matters more is building a company that lasts. That treats its people with dignity. That doesn't sacrifice long-term health for quarterly bumps. Arthur Pendleton taught me that. And I'm not going to abandon that principle just because Wall Street gets impatient." It was a good speech, principled, but Bella could see the independents' reactions. Respect, but not excitement. They wanted growth, vision, something to sell to investors. Riley was offering stability in a world that rewarded disruption. Then came new business, the part everyone was waiting for. Caleb stood. He took a moment to compose himself. Bella saw him close his eyes briefly. Take a breath. When he opened them, the mask was back, confident, commanding. But she had seen beneath it. Whatever demons were chasing him, they were close. He walked to the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board and shareholders today." His voice was strong, practiced, but there was an edge underneath. "My name is Caleb Pendleton, grandson of Arthur Pendleton, founder of this company. I stand before you with deep respect for my grandfather's legacy and deep concern for the company's future." He clicked to a slide, stock price chart over the past 5 years. The downward trend was stark. Pendleton Global stock is down 12% year over year, down 18% over 3 years. We're underperforming the market, underperforming our competitors, losing ground every quarter. And I'm going to be blunt about why. We've lost our edge, our willingness to take risks, our hunger. Another slide. Comparison chart showing competitors growing faster. While other companies are innovating, we're maintaining. While they're expanding into new markets, we're protecting old territory. While they're attracting the best talent, He paused, looked directly at George Riley. "We're being careful, and careful doesn't win in business. Bold wins, decisive wins." He gestured toward Riley. This time there was something almost apologetic in it, like he respected the man but had to do this anyway. "George Riley is a decent man. No one questions his integrity. He's done an admirable job as caretaker. But this company doesn't need a caretaker. It needs a builder. It needs someone who understands that my grandfather didn't build Pendleton Global by playing it safe. He built it by seeing opportunities everyone else missed and having the courage to seize them." Caleb's voice dropped, more personal now. "My grandfather was my hero. Growing up, I heard stories about how he started with a single machine shop and built an empire through vision and guts, how he survived the recession of the 70s, how he pivoted into aerospace when everyone said it was too risky, how he never backed down from a challenge. That's the Pendleton way. That's what this company was built on. And that's what we've lost." He paused. The room was silent. "I know what some of you think, that I'm too young, too inexperienced, that I haven't earned this. And you're right. I haven't earned it the way my grandfather did. I haven't spent 50 years building from nothing. But I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment. Learning this business, making mistakes, yes, but learning from them. And I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove that Pendleton blood still means something, that the next generation can honor the past while building the future." It was good. Really good. More vulnerable than Bella had expected. More human. For a moment, she almost felt sympathy for him, almost understood the pressure of living up to a legend, of having a name that was both gift and burden. But then he made his move. "Therefore, I move for a vote of no confidence in CEO George Riley. Not because he's done anything wrong, but because doing nothing wrong isn't enough. We need bold leadership, visionary leadership. And I nominate myself, Caleb Pendleton, as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer to provide that leadership." Applause scattered through the room. His allies on the board voiced support. "I second the motion." "Well said. Time for a new direction." George Riley stood. He didn't go to the podium, just stood at his seat. When he spoke, his voice carried anyway. "I won't defend myself against accusations of being careful. I am careful. Because I'm responsible for 47,000 employees and their families. Because I remember what happened to companies that chased growth without strategy, that took bold risks, that turned out to be bold disasters. I've been CEO for 6 years. In that time, we've maintained profitability through 2 recessions. We've invested over $500 million in workforce development. We've kept every single factory open when our competitors were closing plants and firing people. That's not nothing, Caleb. That's everything." He sat down, short, powerful, but was it enough? Then Caleb played his card, the one Bella had been dreading. He turned toward her section, made eye contact, and something in his expression changed. The desperation she had seen earlier crystallized into determination. "Before we vote, I need to address something that affects the integrity of this proceeding. My grandfather's will, specifically the bequest to Miss Isabella Rossi." The room shifted. This was the drama they wanted. Caleb continued, his voice taking on an edge. "I'm sure she's a perfectly nice person. I'm sure she served coffee adequately. But $5 million for cutting toast? A diner ownership for pouring coffee? That doesn't pass the smell test. And when I investigated further, I found a pattern of behavior that suggests my grandfather, in his final isolated months, was vulnerable to manipulation." Marcus Davies was on his feet. "Mr. Chairman, this is inappropriate. Miss Rossi is not on trial here." But Caleb pressed on. "She's here as a shareholder claiming legitimacy based on an inheritance I intend to contest. The board deserves to know that her presence, her vote, her voice, all rest on questionable foundations. My grandfather was 87, alone, grieving my grandmother for 38 years. And this young woman insinuated herself into his life, saw an opportunity, and exploited it. That's not kindness. That's calculation." The word stung, but Bella had prepared for this. She gripped the armrests, steadied herself, felt Marcus Davies' hand on her shoulder. And then she heard something unexpected. A voice from the board table. David Morrison, one of Caleb's own allies. "Caleb, sit down. This isn't helping your case." Caleb turned, startled. "David, I'm just establishing the facts." "You're making personal attacks that make you look desperate. Stop!" The rebuke hung in the air. Caleb's face flushed. His mother gripped his arm again, whispered something urgent. But the damage was done. He had overplayed his hand, let emotion override strategy. Robert Sterling spoke. "Mr. Pendleton, confine your remarks to the motion at hand. Miss Rossi's inheritance is a separate legal matter. This is not the venue." Caleb nodded stiffly, returned to his seat. But Bella saw it, the mask slipping further, the desperation turning to panic. Whatever he needed this for, losing was not an option he could afford. "Does anyone else wish to speak on the motion?" Sterling asked. Bella stood. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. Caleb's expression was shock mixed with anger. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her to fight back. "Mr. Chairman," Bella said. Her voice shook but held. "I am a shareholder. I have 1 share of Pendleton Global stock, given to me by Arthur Pendleton with explicit instructions to attend this meeting. I have a right to speak." Sterling looked at Marcus Davies. Davies nodded. "She does." "Very well, Miss Rossi. You have the floor." Bella walked to the podium. Each step felt like walking through water, but she reached it, gripped the sides, faced 200 people who were waiting to judge whether a waitress deserved to be heard. "My name is Isabella Rossi," she began. The microphone made her voice stronger than it felt. "Caleb is right about one thing. I'm a waitress. I served Arthur Pendleton coffee every morning for 18 months at the Morning Glory Diner. I cut his toast into 4 pieces because his hands shook from arthritis. I talked to him even though he never responded. I treated him with the dignity every human being deserves." She paused. Let them see her. "I didn't know who he was. Didn't know about the money or this company or any of this. I was just trying to make someone's morning a little better, to see him as a person, not an inconvenience. And apparently that was rare enough to be remarkable." Her voice grew stronger. "Caleb talks about his grandfather's legacy, about bold vision and taking risks. Let me tell you what I learned about Arthur Pendleton from 18 months of cutting his toast. He was the loneliest man I've ever known. He sat in that diner every day watching people, studying them, looking for something he'd lost. Not business opportunities, not investment angles, just simple human decency, kindness without agenda. And he found so little of it that when he finally did, he didn't know what to do except leave everything he had to protect it." She pulled papers from her folder. "These are medical records, neurological evaluations, psychiatric assessments, all from Arthur's final year, all showing perfect cognitive function, no dementia, no diminished capacity. He knew exactly what he was doing." Dr. Finch stood. "I'm Dr. Alistair Finch, Arthur's physician for 40 years. I administered those evaluations personally. Arthur Pendleton was one of the sharpest minds I've ever known until his final week. His will reflects his true wishes executed with complete mental clarity." Bella continued. "But this isn't about me defending my inheritance. This is about what Pendleton Global becomes. Caleb spoke about bold vision. Let me show you what that vision looks like in practice." She displayed Arthur's documentation. 30 million lost on a tech startup, 20 million on failed real estate ventures, 2.1 million in gambling debts. This is boldness without judgment, risk without strategy. The kind of leadership that would bet this company's future on instinct instead of analysis. She saw Caleb's face, the color draining, the realization that his past was being weaponized against him, but she pressed forward. Arthur didn't leave this company to Caleb for one simple reason. He knew what kind of leader his grandson would be. Not through spite, through observation, through documentation. through the heartbreaking realization that blood doesn't guarantee character. Then Bella shifted, softened her voice. But I understand something else too. I understand what it's like to live in a shadow, to feel like you're constantly being measured against someone you can never match, to need so badly to prove yourself that you make desperate choices. She looked directly at Caleb. I know what desperation feels like. I lived with it for 3 years. The difference is I learned that proving yourself doesn't come from taking what others built. It comes from building something yourself, from earning respect one small act at a time, from understanding that legacy isn't inherited, it's created. The room was absolutely silent. Caleb was staring at her. For just a moment, the mask dropped completely. She saw the boy underneath the man, scared, overwhelmed, trying so hard to be something he wasn't ready to be. Which brings me to my proposal, Bella said. I'm not here to tear Caleb down or defend my inheritance. I'm here to build something Arthur and his wife Eleanor dreamed of. A company that doesn't just make money, but makes a difference. She took a breath. I propose an amendment to the corporate charter, the creation of the Pendleton Legacy Foundation, funded by 10% of annual profits, approximately $120 million per year, dedicated to supporting small businesses, educational scholarships, and community programs. Gasps rippled through the room. Patricia Chen sat forward. 10% of profits? That's enormous. It's strategic, Bella countered. ESG performance matters now. Companies with strong environmental, social, and governance profiles attract better talent, better customers, better capital. They outperform peers over the long term because they build loyalty that transcends price competition. She displayed research data. Pendleton Global can be an industry leader, can prove that manufacturing companies compete on more than cost, that we can be known for building communities as well as equipment, that profit and purpose aren't enemies. Walter Freeman leaned forward. Who would run this foundation? I would, as an independent director reporting to the board. I'm not asking for a seat on the board, not asking to run operations, just asking to be the custodian of Arthur's real legacy. His belief that businesses should serve people. George Riley stood. If I may, Mr. Chairman. Sterling nodded. Riley walked to the front, standing beside Bella at the podium. I've been CEO for 6 years. I've kept this company stable, profitable, and ethical. But I'll be the first to admit we've lacked something. A soul, a purpose beyond profit. This foundation could be that purpose. It could make Pendleton Global stand for something worth believing in. I fully support this proposal. It was unexpected, powerful. Riley's endorsement carried weight. He was essentially saying that Bella's vision was what his leadership needed, that they could work together, that stability plus purpose equaled something greater than either alone. Bella looked at Riley gratefully, then back to the board. I'm asking you to take a chance on someone unconventional, someone whose only qualification is that she saw an old man as human and tried to make his mornings better. But I'm also asking you to take a chance on something bigger, on the idea that businesses can have souls, that legacy means something, that the best way to honor Arthur Pendleton isn't to recreate what he built, but to build what he wished he'd built before grief consumed him. She looked at Eleanor's photograph in her mind, at Arthur's shaky handwriting. If that's not enough, then vote for Caleb. Give him his chance. But if you believe that character matters, that intention matters, that building something beautiful is worth more than just building something big, then vote for this foundation. Vote for the vision Arthur and Eleanor believed in. She stepped back from the podium. Marcus Davies was there to steady her. The room erupted in murmurs. Sterling banged his gavel. Order, we'll now proceed to votes. First motion, vote of no confidence in CEO George Riley with nomination of Caleb Pendleton as replacement. All in favor? 3 hands went up. Only 3. David Morrison, Caleb's ally, abstained. A devastating blow. Caleb's face went white. All opposed? 9 hands. The independents had broken against him. His presentation had been good, but Bella's had been better, more honest, more aligned with where the market was moving. Motion fails, George Riley remains CEO. Caleb sat frozen, watching his birthright slip away. Diana's hand gripped his shoulder, not comforting, accusing. Bella looked away. That was a private grief. Second motion, creation of the Pendleton Legacy Foundation as proposed by shareholder Isabella Rossi. Discussion? Patricia Chen spoke. I've reviewed the ESG research. The numbers support this. If we execute correctly, this could increase long-term shareholder value while doing measurable good. I vote yes. Walter Freeman. Arthur talked to me about her months before he died. Said he'd found someone who understood what we'd lost. Someone with Eleanor's heart. I believe him. I vote yes. One by one, hands rose. Arthur's loyalists. The independents seeing strategic value. Even one of Caleb's allies, unable to vote against a foundation honoring Arthur without looking heartless. Motion passes, 11 in favor, 1 opposed. The room erupted in applause, real applause, shareholders standing, media cameras focusing on Bella. She sat and let the moment wash over her. She had won, against every odd, against entitlement and wealth and skepticism. She had walked into a room of power and convinced them that a waitress deserved not just a hearing, but a victory. Caleb stood, moved toward the door. But as he passed Bella's row, he stopped, looked at her. The hatred was gone. In its place was something like resignation, maybe even respect. You're right, he said quietly. Only she could hear. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never will be. But I needed to try. Needed to prove to her. He glanced at Diana. That I could be him. You don't have to be him, Bella said. You just have to be you. Yeah, well, I don't know who that is yet. He walked away. Diana followed, silent and cold. After the meeting, the chaos was overwhelming. Shareholders congratulating Bella, media requests, questions about the foundation. Marcus Davies ran interference expertly. Official statement tomorrow. Thank you. Walter Freeman waited until the crowd thinned, approached with tears in his eyes. I was there when Arthur met Eleanor, 1959, her little cafe in Brooklyn. She had this way of making people feel seen. You have that same gift. He was right about you. He handed her an old photograph. Young Arthur and Eleanor laughing on church steps. He'd want you to have this, to remember what you're fighting for. George Riley appeared, extended his hand. Thank you for not throwing me under the bus. That partnership you described, stability plus purpose. I think we can build something remarkable together. I think we can too. 6 months later, the world had indeed changed. The Morning Glory diner had been renovated but respectfully. The equipment was state-of-the-art. The kitchen gleamed, but the character remained. The red vinyl booths, the counter's original shape, the neon sign now fully lit, Morning Glory in cursive that glowed warm at night. Booth 4 had special treatment, protected under clear acrylic, a brass plaque above. Arthur's Corner, in memory of Arthur Pendleton and Eleanor, who taught us that kindness is never wasted. Bella came in most mornings, not to waitress, to be present. Sal ran operations, $75,000 a year and 20% ownership. Brenda was general manager, $60,000 plus bonuses. The staff had health insurance, paid vacation, 401k matching. The diner thrived. Revenue up 40% from quality and atmosphere and word of mouth that meals here came with dignity. Her afternoons were at the Pendleton Legacy Foundation offices. 15th floor of Pendleton Tower, staff of 18. Annual budget of $120 million. First year, 300 small business grants, 75 educational scholarships, 500 graduated from restaurant training into good jobs, community centers in 12 cities. The work was overwhelming, gratifying, exhausting, perfect. Every day she made decisions that changed lives, built something Arthur and Eleanor would be proud of. The foundation's first annual report featured their photograph, young and laughing, continuing their legacy of kindness and dignity. Bella had learned to live with wealth without letting it corrupt her. Bigger apartment, but not extravagant. Reliable car, but not luxury. Most money stayed invested. She lived off a foundation salary that was good, but not outrageous. Still knew the price of bread, still tipped well, still saw people instead of functions. She was painting again. Second bedroom as studio. Canvases everywhere, color returning, first gallery show next month, proceeds to the foundation. She had found balance between art and commerce, dreaming and doing, who she was and who she was becoming. Her mother thrived. Private room with garden view, physical therapy, art therapy, painting watercolors. Some days she knew Bella, other days she didn't, but she was comfortable, safe, cared for with dignity. That was all Bella had wanted. The ritual continued. Every morning at 7 a.m., Bella sat in booth 4, Arthur's corner, black coffee and toast cut in quarters. 10 minutes of quiet reflection, remembering the old man who changed her life, the wife he loved, the legacy entrusted to someone with no credentials except character. This morning, a young woman entered, early 20s, nervous, worn clothes, art portfolio under her arm, sat at the counter, ordered just coffee, counted change to pay. Bella recognized that look, that desperation. She had worn it for 3 years. She walked over, sat beside the young woman. "That's a portfolio. Are you an artist?" The woman looked startled. "Yeah, why?" "I used to be an art student, before life interfered. What do you paint?" The woman softened. "Urban landscapes, Chicago architecture. But I can't afford supplies anymore. Can barely afford coffee. Trying to get into the Art Institute, but the application fee alone is $200. Bella smiled, saw herself 3 years ago. "Tell me about your work." They talked 20 minutes. The young woman, Maya, showed her portfolio. The paintings were good, raw but honest, full of perspective from living at street level. Looking up at skyscrapers and seeing both aspiration and barrier, Bella saw potential, vision that could be nurtured. The Pendleton Legacy Foundation has scholarships for artists, covers tuition, supplies, living expenses, everything. We're accepting applications now. Maya's eyes widened. "I've heard of that, but those are for exceptional people, people with credentials. They're for people with talent and character, for people who see beauty in hard places and try to capture it, for people who need a chance." Bella pulled a business card. "Send your portfolio to this email. Mark it for my attention. I'm Isabella Rossi. I run the foundation, and I'd like to see you get that chance." Maya took the card with shaking hands. "Why? You don't even know me." "Someone once gave me a chance when I desperately needed it. Saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. I'm just paying it forward." After Maya left, portfolio clutched like treasure, Bella returned to booth 4. Coffee cold, didn't care. Sat in Arthur's corner and felt his presence. Eleanor's presence. The bell chimed. Another customer. Another story. The diner hummed with quiet life. Sal at the grill. Brenda making rounds. The smell of coffee and bacon, and the ordinary miracle of people gathering to eat and be seen. Bella looked at the brass plaque, Arthur's corner, smiled. "I hope I'm doing this right. I hope you're both proud. I hope Eleanor's light shines brighter because of what we built." The photograph didn't answer, but Bella felt warmth, a sense that somewhere, 2 people who lost everything and rebuilt were watching and approving. That faith placed in a broke waitress had been justified. That kindness wasn't just its own reward, but the foundation of everything worth building. She had been tested, not with questions she could study for, but with the hardest test. What would she do with unasked for power? How would she treat people when she didn't have to treat them well? Who would she become when she could afford to be anyone? She had answered with the only thing that mattered: character. The same character Arthur saw in booth 4. The same character Eleanor built an empire on. The same character that separated people who accumulated wealth from people who used it to reduce cruelty. Morning sun slanted through the window. Dust motes danced. Outside, Chicago woke to another day. People rushing to work, bills to pay, dreams to chase, ordinary struggles. But inside the Morning Glory Diner, for 10 minutes every morning, one woman sat in a corner booth and remembered that ordinary struggles deserve dignity, that small kindnesses mattered, that the world was exactly as good as the people we chose to be when no one important watched. Arthur had watched, had seen, had believed, and Bella had proven him right, not by being perfect, not by never making mistakes, but by staying true to the heart he recognized, by building something beautiful from revenge's ashes, by carrying Eleanor's light forward into a world that desperately needed it. The inheritance hadn't been money, it had been faith. Faith that one person with a kind heart could make a difference. Faith that character counted more than credentials. Faith that a waitress who cut toast might be exactly the person to change the world. And somehow impossibly wonderfully she had.